part 2 of this Killzone retrospective. Today, we're gonna... Wait, sorry, what's that? You... you didn't watch part 1? Oh, well.
What are you doing? Like, it's called part 2, for a fucking reason. Like, you click on a 2.5 hour long video and you don't even watch part 1. What am I even doing? What am I even doing here? Just watch part 1! Killzone 2 was both a critical and commercial success. While the series would always have its detractors, and no matter how unwanted by the developers, its comparisons to others in the genre, it had nevertheless established itself firmly as a flagship series on the PlayStation. The story had been left on a cliffhanger, so there was zero surprise that Guerrilla did indeed have plans for another sequel. Though what did surprise would be its announcement at this time for plans for a brand new IP. Guerrilla Games had proven itself effective at showcasing Sony's hardware, from its endeavour into handheld gaming to its mastery of the PS3's capabilities. But by this point, the so-called console wars had moved to the theatre of motion control technology, with the Xbox Kinect and PlayStation Move dropping within 2 months of each other. What a horrible time to be alive. Since 2009, Sony had also been attempting to push for stereoscopic 3D compatibility in its first-party games. While Guerrilla had previously had 5 years development time between Killzone and its first sequel, albeit with a PSP game in between, a short 2 years separate Killzone 2 from this next installment, intended in part to be a showcase for these new technologies. While I found no testimonial evidence for rushed development or crunch, I find it hard to imagine Sony would have allowed for such a big title to trail too far behind the September 2010 release of its Move hardware. Either way, with a pricey collector's edition complete with art book, Helghast bust, and cloaked sniper figure, all of which I have by the way, and following a spectacularly cinematic trailer, Killzone 3 was released on February 22nd, 2011. To a beautifully tragic score by our man Joris, Killzone 3 does a series first by actually opening with full disclosure. Here we're caught up with the events of the universe. The First War, the invasion of Vecta, Operation Archangel, right up to the nuclear detonation of the Helghan capital. At which point we're transported to Vizari's palace to see this very moment, not only once again from the perspective of the Helghast, but from the perspective of the Helghast.
My archer, all preparations have been made.
Where are Radek and Star?
Surrounded by his inner circle, Radek, members of the Senate, and the briefest glimpse of a previously unmentioned daughter, Vizari addresses the nation one last time.
My people, sons and daughters of Helghan, on this day, as our enemy ships burn away in orbit, as our bodies lie broken in our streets, we are once again reminded of the depths of their depravity. For years we have suffered unbearable hardships, banished by our enemies to die from disease, from famine. They scarred us, they weakened us, but that time has passed. For years we worked away on empty stomachs, slowly rebuilding our strength, our pride, and our nation. But that time has passed. All these years, I have been humbled by the honor to lead you ever onwards. From this day till the end of days.
And then he got recoed.
We cut to 6 months later. Far from a defeated nation or a weakened regime, we see that Vizari has become exactly what he said the ISA feared. A martyr.
We remember the hope he gave us, the purpose he gave us, the vision he gave us. A vision in which the Helghast people reclaim their rightful place in this universe. Years from now, we will tell our children of this day. The day his vision became our reality!
In case you're wondering, yeah, this game did come out 4 years before The Force Awakens. We cut away yet again to some mountain facility, in the role of, would you believe it, a Helghast trooper. Oh my god, it's happening! We're finally getting to play as the real heroes! We do some Helghast things, giving people clearance codes, admiring our glorious navy, being an accessory to potential war crimes, the usual. And we're eventually told to report to weapons testing for the tutorial.
Please, leave me alone until after the experiment.
After target practice, we're sent to a broadcast room where, alongside this dodgy bloke we saw during the intro, Captain Narvel could be seen kneeling in front of a camera, awaiting execution by us.
What?
Oh, I guess we were ISA all along. Never mind.
Oppressed!
Finally putting an end to the timeline jumping, we pick up where we left off in Killzone 2, Rico having just killed VIII, and Sev's not taking it very well. And neither's Captain Narvel, who after a failed effort to resuscitate the dictator, calls for an immediate withdrawal, as well as our demotion.
Command's pulling the plug. They want us to execute an emergency exit scenario. We're pulling every soldier off this planet.
We're retreating? I ain't leaving. This war isn't even half finished. What is this
Shut
bullshit?
the fuck up!
We're given our evac point right on what is now a nuclear blast crater, but the organised retreat becomes a run for your life with the arrival of some Helghast ARC cruisers.
Fire back! At what? Everything!
Yeah, I'm getting the distinct feeling this game's not trying to be taken quite so seriously. Yeah. We start on foot through the ruined, half-melted streets of Puris, shards of metal girders still red-hot from the blast, and an endless stream of cruisers above us. It's visually spectacular in a morbid, horrifying sort of way.
Let's kill them quietly, before they see us.
So yeah, this game looks graphically much the same as Killzone 2. Not that there's anything wrong with that, the engine was hardly dated, hell 2 still looks good, though while 3 is built on the same foundation, is it just me who thinks something's a little off? There's a sharpness to it with, yeah, better texture quality and pop, but compared to 2, everything's left a little jagged looking. Not sure how to put it, but side by side, literal same rooms, same people, it's like someone turned off all the post-processing which 2 was lathered in. I don't know. One thing which has undoubtedly changed though is the gunplay. Aiming is far snappier, and that weapon weightiness is all but gone. Weapon slots have also been increased to allow a primary, secondary and heavy weapon, up to and including detachable mounted weapons, and the new brutal melee system is a welcome, if gratuitous, addition. Also, while it was possible to revive fallen comrades in the last game, only now will they actually return the favour, giving you a second shot at life, assuming they can get to you. We end up passing through some quite interesting environments while trying to regroup the convoy. A wildlife exhibit which I can totally imagine groups of Helghast school kids visiting to learn about the horrifying dog-sized spiders which apparently make up most of this planet's fauna. And later we get a firefight through a museum filled with art idolising the former autarch. But it's mostly recycled stuff from Killzone 2. In fact, there's a lot of reused assets. We pass through bombed out homes, bedrooms, bathrooms and kitchens still recognisable, but it's lacking that fresh intrigue I got from the streets of the last game. Every room having the same bookshelves, flags, and even wall decor ripped straight out of Radix Academy. It's a nitpick, but you should know by now, I love the little details that give a lived-in, personable feeling to a world. But instead, I'm reminded that this is a video game made by hard-working people on a schedule. We soon run across a burst petrosite conduit, similar to the one Sev found before, except the once blue electrical substance is now green, and we spot a group of Helghast and hazmat gear tampering with stuff.
This is the purest sample we've seen yet.
No! Stay back! Gordon! Be careful, Gordon!
Yes, you're right.
After watching them leave in a dropship with markings different from the Helghast military, we finally make it back to Narvel's convoy. Despite being the unrelenting fuck-up that he is, the game is trying really hard to make Rico suddenly seem like the voice of reason, while Narvel's gone from the hard-ass but competent enough captain we saw in the previous game to a petty, narrow-minded douchebag ever since his voice inexplicably changed.
Good work taking out that arc tower.
Take Velasquez and his mouth out of my face. I need the two of you on point.
Pushing along a collapsed highway, we're to clear the way for a pair of Exos. It's cool getting to see these things in action from the outside this time, including front row seats to a mech battle with some crazy Helghast robot, which I'm sure I saw fighting some bow and arrow wielding redhead once. Like our last bridge battle, this is awesome, with NPC tanks, mechs, dropships, infantry, and still no spectator mode. Guerrilla certainly know how to compose these battle sequences. While the ISA are retreating across the Corinth, the game cuts to the palace, where the remains of Helghast High Command are overseeing events. The Helghast Senate, Commander-in-Chief of the military Admiral Orlok, and at the far end of the table, a man we've already met.
Am I missing something here? What about the tank group on the left?
Johann Stahl. Well, I'm thrilled to see that the private sector is interested in state affairs. Again.
This is Johann Brim Stahl, chairman of Stahl Arms, the weapons manufacturer producing everything from the STA line of firearms to ATACs to Overlords, and voiced, McDowell-y, by the legendary Malcolm McDowell, known for Clockwork Orange, Caligula, and most importantly,
President John Henry Eden.
While neither military nor government in any official capacity, Stahl's presence and open ridicule of the Admiral's capabilities is a clear sign of intent. He's announcing his candidacy.
Does it hurt, knowing that no matter what you do, you'll never emerge from Visari's shadow? Is that why you let him die?
Back with the action, we're treated to an on-rails turret segment, and as always, spectacle is just smeared across the screen, from the ships engaging above to collapsing buildings around us in the streets. And with our evac cruisers now in sight, we run for our lives from some insta-kill APCs who we've seen eat buildings before, so yeah, don't let them touch you. We help some allied troops along the way, and I like the effort made to humanise more of the ISA this time around. With recurring names and faces we'll see throughout the game. Even if only background dressing and dead by the end, it's just nice to know that we're more than Sev, Rico, and 1,000 clones of Helmet Trooper 67C. Wait, aren't we forgetting someone?
Narco, come on!
You guys go ahead!
We get another call for help, this time from a girl. Rico offers to help, but with Narvel having become nothing but a prop in Rico's undeserved redemption arc, he countermands him since we gotta do things by the book, etc. But really, I think he just wants to be the one to rescue the only woman in the entire ISA. Speaking of which, where the hell is Luger?
Get lost.
We're interrupted with the appearance of a mechanised battleship, which turns its arc cannon on the waiting fleet. Having lost our rides in the chaos, we find a couple of ISA exos, and hey, exo segment again! Well, I'm glad they reused these assets at least. Getting a better view here of these mechs, they are literally just arc cannons with legs. And as for my daily scheduled gush over vehicle designs, I'm actually going to pass on this one. Not mind you that there's anything intrinsically wrong with them, but personally speaking, I was just never a big fan of the inclusion of these maulers. It's the power creep. A giant mech is just too far from the lo-fi goodness of the series till now. But even that aside, I just think they're kind of generic looking, as far as giant four-legged spider tanks go at least. Rico decides he's going to go after Jammer because he don't leave people behind. So we're on our own through the final trek to the extraction point. While things have been a little too action movie for the last few sections, this last run through hell brings things tonally right back to where the last game was at its best. The retreat in obvious disarray, now isolated units being picked off one by one, squads burned alive, guys heard dying on the radio while calling out for orders and direction. But through this trench line we finally reach the evac site, just in time to see the first of the cruisers already leaving, and the encircling Helghast closing in.
God damn, this isn't a drill! Get to your transport! Move! Sevchenko! Give me your hand! Where the hell is Rico?
I don't know. No, wait! What about Rico?
Shut the fuck up!
Hey! Hey! There's Rico!
Hey! Get to cover! Now!
And that was Killzone 3. Okay, no, 6 months on. The ISA survivors have gone into hiding, and Stahl's refused to leave his chair in all that time until he's sufficiently pissed in Orlok's Cheerios about it.
The people of Helghan want results, not empty promises from you, Orlok.
Once again, you've somehow managed to distract us from the real topic at hand. Why haven't you delivered your weapon prototype to the military?
Because, Admiral, this is irradiated petrosite. And I will not place weapons of such magnitude into the hands of a total incompetent...
There's politic talk here with Orlok, for now, effectively filling Visari's shoes. However, with nothing yet official, Stahl uses this nonsense cannon to try win the Senate over from the Admiral. But failing that, a threat to halt material support to the military finally makes the Senate concede.
Just a moment, Chairman. Will you give us time to reconsider?
What?
Meanwhile, down in Spider County Helghast, we see the surviving ISA. Captain Narvel is trying to re-establish communications with Earth, so we're sent on a stealth mission through the jungle to a nearby downed ISA cruiser. Besides the fact we're getting to see Luger's M66 for the first time in a long time, this segment is fun. The change of environment is certainly welcome, as is the change of pace. Killzone 2 never really did stealth, but despite being scripted and only really applicable to this level, it's enjoyable. Oh! So we're having to deal with predators now.
No, not you.
Being spotted thankfully isn't an automatic mission fail. Instead, if an enemy raises the alarm, these capture troopers will appear, charge straight for you, and insta-kill at melee range. Similar looking to elite shock troops, though plated in the white armour of Stahl arms, they can be tough to take down if you aren't quick. Their armour are able to resist a good few seconds of sustained small arms fire while they run towards their target. Sneaking around, we come across some war crimes with these hazmat troopers.
I love this gun.
And eventually reaching the cruiser, Sev's able to link Narvel into ISA command, only for us all to get the bad news. With Vecta's capitulation, the war is officially over, and we're told to surrender with hope of negotiating a release later as prisoners of war. With the transmission having been intercepted and dropships seen heading towards the camp, we fight our way back to join the battle. It becomes a last stand against waves of enemies, including those Helghast troop carrier mechs we saw earlier. But as a low visibility white fog rolls in, we're eventually given a cutscene defeat. Gun cam, slow-mo. This is silly, right?
Report to Chairman Stahl that we have positive ID on both Narville and Sevchenko.
As we transition to some frozen shoreline, can I just comment on the diversity of environments in this game? Yet whether city, wasteland, jungle or Skyrim, it still feels definitively Helghast. I know I nitpicked some of the visuals earlier, but on this, and the far more vibrant colour palette, Killzone 3 nails it. While trying to rile up his guards by channeling his inner Rico, Sev is saved from a shanking by a harpoon through window followed by a Rico with hair again. The no longer bald fuck. And also I believe this puts us at dropship crash number 3. Sev tries to convince Rico's afro to rescue Narvel, still aboard a dropship heading for a facility down here at Helghast's South Pole. No one else wants to, Rico's earlier no man left behind code being more of a guideline apparently, but Sev insists, leading to an on-rails segment taking out Helghast air defences built into a series of repurposed oil rigs. Another reminder of Helghast's industrial past, but also of the obsolescence of fossil fuels in favour of petrocite. Actually a subtle bit of world building drowned amongst all the shooty bang pew. Up to 4 crashes now with our intruder taking a hit, we continue on foot against Winter Gear soldiers and jetpack troopers, afterwards stealing a flight suit for ourselves in order to iceberg hop our way towards the last rig, planting D-charges on its support bases in AA Tower, squeeze for luck, and then the explosion causes some shrapnel to slow-mo hit our jetpack, crashing us to shore. Okay, yeah, not a dropship, but still dude, your bones are going to be fucking powder by the time you're middle-aged. Please stop. Joining the assault, we flank around their defences to steal a wasp launcher, with fire modes alternating between homing missile swarms and a stupidly overpowered artillery mode, using it to clear the way.
Sev?
Did good, Jammer. Keep him in line, alright?
Oh yeah, that lady's here.
You two are with Sev and me.
And now she's gone. Okay.
Vigilant base to Argus 2. Vigilant to Argus 2. Come in, over.
Had a slight weapons malfunction. We're all fine here now, thank you. How are you?
Taking a cable car up the mountain, we arrive, where we started, at Stahl Arms' Deep South facility. Clearance codes, glorious navy, war crimes, the usual. Only in this timeline, we're assigned to guarding the factory floor, skipping weapon training to instead travel by some prison cells, where we see Narvel on his way to the broadcast room.
What are you doing? Get out of here!
While I have a willing participant, can I sidetrack briefly to talk about designs again? Because, while a lot of things have carried over from Killzone 2, the Helghast models are actually new. They've changed quite a lot, and not entirely for the better. That crude utilitarian aesthetic, pouches, patches, very near real-world military look is gone with this newer, higher-tech design instead. Where once there was a basic shoulder pad, triad printed on, we've now got these generic sci-fi shiny steel plates, and I just don't like it as much. Now, big caveat, everyone we've seen since the jungle have actually been Stahl's private forces. And if that was the explanation, I'd love it. These aren't conscripts, they're private sector. Better paid, better equipped, with the state branding quietly removed. Problem is, it's not just these guys. Every bloody Helghast has been the same. Call this a nitpick, but I'm saying this one was actually a mistake, and actively harms and muddies the game's narrative, with two distinct factions of Helghast being set up, yet no visual distinction between them. As far as I'm concerned, this is as much a world-building blunder as a matter of personal design preference, and it just bothers me considering what comes later and how they could have presented it so much clearer. Having become stuck guarding the main factory, we need to create a diversion to slip away. So, you know, push buttons, turn wheels.
Hey, shut it off!
Orders! Get away from shutting down. Attempting shutdown. It's not shutting down.
Yeah, I saw August 2 leaving as soon as the sabotage started.
No? We pass through labs experimenting on the green irradiated petricite, with each room becoming more disturbing than the last, with the reason for bringing ISA prisoners here suddenly becoming clear. The timelines reconverge as we enter the broadcast room, pretending like we're meant to be there.
Captain Narville, do you know who I am? Typical.
We are prisoners of war! We have rights! You just violated the Stockholm Treaty!
Stockholm? What planet do you think you're on?
We go live in 3, 2...
Good day, my fellow Helghans. I am your Handstar. This is something of a rarity for me, because speeches are not my forte, but honesty is.
While Stahl's speech is broadcast across the planet, we get another missed opportunity to show some diversity in Helghans. So far, according to this game, Helghan is populated entirely by soldiers and spiders. I mean, civilians? Workers? Even reuse the miner model from 2, anything.
I know what this nation needs. And I will cut out this disease of compliance and subjugation. So, to honor VIII, tomorrow we launch the greatest military campaign in our history. And to celebrate that, I will give you justice. Revenge! And the death of his killers!
Just as before, Sev turns the weapon on Stahl, gives the worst line of the game.
You?
Yeah, me.
You? Yes, me!
And the chairman GTFOs while his entourage melts. Gotta love the bloody mess perk. With the best weapon in the game, we fight our way out the facility, through captured troopers and hazmat dudes, but more importantly, I can finally demonstrate this game's glass shatter effect. It's pretty good. I reckon I'd give it maybe a 7 out of 10 when shot, but an 8 when smashed by physics. With it obvious that the Helghast are preparing to renew the war, we leave Narville to rescue the other prisoners, while we try to figure out what Stahl's planning.
That's Earth.
Good job, Rico.
Jesus Christ. We gotta tell Narville. Come on.
Back outside, we rendezvous with Narville, get an attack, and then yet another in this game's endless fucking cutscenes.
Captain, we got a problem.
Sir, we need to get you out of here.
Not yet. I have to upload the battle plans to my cruiser. Orlok's going to jump all over me.
Stahl.
I don't really have time to listen to you gloat.
Stahl.
What? You're to turn over your petricide weapons, hardware, personnel, and yourself to my control.
Don't be absurd. This is not a negotiation. You will do as the Autarch commands.
Autarch? Autarch? You made him Vasari's heir?
Jammer arrives to exfil the prisoners, while we jump into yet another on-rails section, chasing down Stahl's cruiser in an ice saw. Our 5-minute drive from the South Pole somehow gets us to a completely different biome where we see, beyond a city-sized scrapyard, a space elevator, with the Helghast fleet amassing around it in preparation for their invasion of Earth. By the way, according to the novelization, and no other source that I could find, this flattened barren wasteland is apparently supposed to be the former site of Puris, with those space elevators being a very recent construction built from the irradiated bomb crater. Now, I have issues with this particular piece of lore, and while I was going to go into all the reasons why, I've decided I'll just ignore it. Oh no! Big boy! There's a couple new unit types in this scrapyard. First, we have returning favourite, the Virgin Shock Trooper, and we get a new LMG Trooper, which I almost feel is an update on the original Mr. Freeze, with their neck piece and function of course, though thankfully subscribed to the Phase 2 design updates. While we're playing in the scrapyard, the rest of the ISA are approaching the elevators, but stumble into a petricite fence similar to before, only this time green, and it'll turn you inside out. With its vision apparently based on movement, Narvel sends one of our recurring tertiary characters out to very slowly hack the fence. Meanwhile, Sev and Rico are chased by a mobile garbage masher. Boarding said masher with the help of Jammer, we hijack and smash it through the fence, very nearly killing everyone in the process. Redemption arc, voice of reason, etc. With what's left of the ISA army, we launch a final assault on the elevators, only for a mauler to stop us in our tracks. By now, there can't be any more than a couple hundred of us left, and with Narvel unwilling to throw those lives against an unstoppable obstacle, sounds a retreat, while Rico urges that they press the attack. Which, to be fair, is kind of the only option you have in this moment, so, for once, yeah, Rico's right.
Could you just back off? There are more important things than our men. We cannot let the Helghast get to Earth, with whatever Stahl has been building in those labs!
If we go out there, we can kiss our asses goodbye.
Fine, run. I'm gonna outflank you.
On foot? That's even worse than his idea.
You know what, you can either help me or you can get the hell out of my way.
Shevchenko, stand down. This gung-ho crap is gonna get us all killed.
No, this is what's gonna get us all killed.
With us going up against the Mauler alone, Rico and Narvel finally get their shit together to draw its fire, while we use the Wasp launcher to shoot the red glowing bits Vimeo game. You can tell the devs wanted to make this encounter a highlight of the game, building up these mechs from the start, and it's the closest thing it comes to a final boss. Unfortunately, the red glowing bits weren't enough, and our remaining tanks get destroyed while Jammer gets our first inexplicably harmless dropship crash.
Just tissue damage, kid.
Fuck off. With nobody else responding, Sev leads a handful of remaining men for the final stretch, right beneath the Mauler's legs. Sure, things look fucking awful now, but some stabby friends arrive to cheer Sev up. That's how they learned about teamwork or something. On our, 27th on-rail segment of the game, we're back to minigunning, shooting anything that looks important off the Mauler until it finally bloody dies.
This is it? 60 guys?
While Rico fails at counting, there's all of a couple dozen ISA left, surely making Operation Archangel officially the greatest military disaster in history. While Narvel commends Rico for the effort, they resign themselves to the fact that they're simply not enough to stop the fleet. But Sev politely disagrees.
That's bullshit!
And together they concoct a plan to hijack the spaceport's communications systems in order to warn Earth, and if possible, delay the launch by destroying the station itself. Boarding lifts, they head up to orbit, just in time to see Stahl's ship arrive. And if I may say, that is a nice looking ship.
Do you think maybe he's compensating for something?
So, second game to end on a space station. Neat. The first few areas are filled with spider mines, a nice throwback to Liberation, as well as a good mix of Helghast, with elite shock troops, LMGs and shotgunners.
Sir, the ISA army is here. They took out the Mauler and they're coming up the space
Enough with the ISA. Either they die, or you do.
By the order of the High Council, I, Johann Brimstall, report for duty. I'm willing to serve in whatever capacity the state wishes. This is it? I thought you'd have more security.
Did he bring the weapons?
Electrostatic energy profile confirmed on the chairman's cruiser. They're all there, sir.
You should be proud, Stahl. Your weapons are going to usher a new era for the Helghan dominance. I'll speak highly of you at your funeral. Arrest the chairman.
Ah, yes. The men of our proud and painfully underpaid military. Commodore, are you ready?
Yes, Stahl.
Fire.
And thus begins the brief, but altogether devastating, Helghan Civil War. which, to reiterate, is exactly why distinguishing these factions would have been cool, with potentially having a three-way battle through the station between Stahl's forces, Orlocks and the ISA. But alas, no. And this ties directly into another big problem I have with this game, but put a pin in that for now.
This is how you get the Senate to accept you. The Senate will beg me to forgive them, right after you do. Get on your knees, now. Get on your knees!
The station loses artificial gravity for a bit, which, besides the funsies, turns grenades into fucking missiles. There's another big boy fight, the strategy for dealing with which remains unchanged, and we get some lovely views of the battle outside while the station falls apart. Seriously, fleet combat never gets old. With Stahl having become a slasher villain, Orlok begins begging for his life.
Think about what you're doing. You're going to leave Helghast defenseless.
That's it? That's the best you've got?
Listen! Even if you win, do you really think Helghast's enemies will give you time to rebuild? Look around you, Stahl. You're destroying our people.
Unless, what if I had no enemies left to fight? What if I used my weapons and killed everyone on Earth? The colonies would be terrified. They'd fall into line, and I wouldn't need your help. Like I said, you're predictable! Shit. That must have hurt.
With Stahl planning to destroy the station, it's a last run for the escape craft. We got snipers, capture troopers, pretty much everything between us and the docking bay, as well as the best gun in the game to make it as much of a last hurrah as possible. With 2 craft remaining, which by the way at my count hold 8 per craft, so good job ISA, a max of 16 people left. We get the 96th and final on-rail shooter segment as the ship gunner flying after Stahl through the middle of this battle. I can't tell you by the way how disappointed I was when I first got this back in the day to learn that this was on rails. Look, snark aside, I don't mind the occasional on-rail segment, but this game's over-reliance on them is coming across as padding. All the while they have done actual vehicle sections which have been some of their best shit.
Just give me something for the pain, and let me fly.
Stahl manages to board his cruiser, and while the thing's shielded, we're able to dive through and attack it from the inside, with some beautiful effects here as we tear away at the hull plating while taking out its point defences. Seriously, I need some kind of strategy game based on this series, with at least some fleet combat in there. I live for this shit. Disabling the warp coil at the last second prevents the ship from leaving and sends it on a plummet towards the planet below.
Chairman, you can't stop it. It's too late.
Watch me!
Come to think of it, Stahl is basically just a slightly more fascist Tony Stark. He manages to fire the emergency booster engines and stabilizes the ship. While he won't be warping anywhere, he'll at least live to fight another day.
Oh, I don't think so.
Shooting down enemy missiles while we MDK dive bomb towards the ship, Rico primes the onboard tactical nuke and gives me the go-ahead to launch. When I have an epiphany. The threat is over. Stahl's invasion has been stopped, so why are we doing this? Justice? Revenge? Those very same justifications used by the Helghast when they launched this invasion. And what was their revenge for? Our invasion of their homeworld? The murder of their leader? But was that murder not justice in itself for the slaughter of innocents on Vecta? It's madness, don't you see? An endless cycle of cause and effect going back to the resource wars that destroyed Earth once already. And of course it won't end here. We pull that trigger, there'll be a reckoning. And a reckoning to that, and on until we've either destroyed ourselves completely, or people start choosing to break the cycle. Well, I'm making that choice. It's time for the cycle to end.
Look out! Missile incoming! Incoming!
Oh, for fuck's sake, fine.
Jammer, are you there? Jammer, respond!
What did I tell you guys about leaving before the explosion starts?
Billions just died.
I'm not hearing any comm traffic.
Yeah, we took out the whole fleet.
I mean nothing. The entire planet is silent.
Jesus, how many people were down there?
And that was Killzone 3. So yeah, we just committed genocide.
Freedom.
Okay, so let's talk about the game itself first. If the fun I had writing about a game is any reflection on the game itself, and I had a lot of fun writing about Killzone 2 in this script, then Killzone 3 might be worse than I used to give it credit for. Is it bad? No. I had a blast replaying this, as with all the games so far. And if you'd asked me before I started this video, I'd have told you straight up Killzone 2 is better, but drabber, more serious, more something you need to be in the right mindset for, while Killzone 3 is cheese, a lot of fun, but ultimately the lesser of the two. That opinion hasn't changed, but the gulf has certainly widened. If Killzone 2 was a masterful anti-war parable, then this one is somewhere between a Call of Duty Black Ops campaign and a Saturday morning cartoon. And yet saying that, out of the two games, the previous of which is still indisputably my favourite, which one have I played more? Killzone 3. Which one did I go back to, mission after mission, to unlock all the trophies and ultimately platinum on my PS3? Killzone 3. Which one is easier to put in, shut the brain off, and just enjoy? Killzone 3. Huh. So, soundtrack, gameplay, visuals, they're all great. It misses a punchy main theme like the previous entries, probably wisely since you're never going to be either rendition of the Helghast March, but instead our man-to-man created the beautiful And Ever We Fight On, a piece which carries extra tragic weight, being composed shortly after the death of Demand's mother, to whom he's openly stated this was something of a tribute to and an outlet for his emotional state at the time. But honestly, all around, just more excellent work from one of the best composers in the industry. Gameplay, it's a tuned up version of Killzone 2 with some additions, and same goes for graphics, though, as I mentioned, I have nitpicks. And again, in terms of visual design, there's a lot of good, and a few missed opportunities. Jumping from location to location gives us a greater level diversity, but does clutter the narrative. Compared to the laser focus of Killzone 2's Battle for Puris, with even the missions outside the city itself still tied to that goal, touring around the whole planet in 3, making sure to crash in every new location for the scrapbook, turns Sev and Rico, who were just two grunts among thousands before, into superheroes round which this whole universe seems to revolve. Speaking of characters, Killzone 3 has a large cast, and while there are good additions, many only exist to add to an already cluttered story. Sev, who was kinda just the straight man soldier boy in a squad of assholes before, grows into more of a protagonist TM here, though it comes to him becoming less of a real person and more of an action hero, inspiring speeches with explosions in the background and all. Rico may be at his least bad here. I'd like to think this is him growing as a person over the games, but it's much more likely the writer is trying to retroactively fix an unlikable piece of shit. Honestly, it harms my opinion of Sev with how quickly he gets over Rico's Ricoisms. You know, the murdering Vasari, the getting Garza killed, the glaring anger issues. Meanwhile, his constant pissing contest with Narvel is just frustrating, who himself is made inexplicably incompetent at every opportunity, just head-ass incapable of reason, but who's also given moments to show that he's a good guy. He just wants to get Corporal Hooper home to his family, guys. It's a touch forced. And hey, while we're going through all the characters, Jammer! Was there a reason, I hear you ask, why I didn't find time to explain her character during the game itself? Who is she? Why is she dressed so differently from everyone? Why is she the only woman we ever bloody see? No. She's just... there. Actually, if I can add a point that I only realised during the edit, know how I said this game was bloated with cutscenes? Jammer's existence is the epitome of this problem, being a character, and not the only one, just the most prominent, who exists exclusively in this cutscene pocket dimension, with no presence in the gameplay of this game, creating a real disconnect between cutscenes and action, where there's zero interplay between the two. You know, it kinda reminds me of when studios who lack faith in a movie would add a famous actor in post, and you just end up with Raymond Burr on the sidelines pretending like he's in the same room as everyone else. You know, if you could lift a character from the story entirely and it changes nothing, then that's probably a sign they shouldn't be there. But now, villains. VIII was a tough act to follow, so it was a good idea both tactically and thematically for two characters to compete to try to fill the void, with the rivalry between them and ensuing civil war being a major plot point. Problem is, and this is where I return to that point I pinned earlier, yes, a power vacuum and Helghast infighting is a perfect idea for both a world building and story progression point of view. But again, if we don't see those cutscenes translated into anything in gameplay, i.e. we don't have two visually distinct factions of Helghast who fight each other as well as us, it makes everything between Orlok and Stahl fucking irrelevant. And I will prove this with science. When throughout the entire course of this game did our heroes ever actually say Orlok's name?
Well, we both know the answer, don't we? None.
While Orlok is an entertaining foil to the much more Machiavellian Stahl, and as much as their side plot might add to the world, whenever we cut to them, we have left the game to watch a political drama completely disconnected from anything involving us. Again, no interplay between the cutscenes and gameplay. He was voiced by Ray Winston though.
I don't look at it like a challenge, in fact, it's like going back to school in a way.
When it comes to Stahl, while still a bit impersonal as a main villain, being Orlok's antagonist more than the players, he makes up for it by being an absolute campy blast.
Sir, ISA troops are approaching.
You couldn't even get that right. Utterly useless.
Part Henry Ford, part Joseph Goebbels, he's an interesting character within the universe, entirely willing to collaborate with VIII's regime while secretly detesting it. Though less due to its ideals and more due to, him not being in charge. With a narcissistic personality and total disregard for life, Helghan or otherwise.
But sir, the men...
Fuck 'em.
While both he and Orlok are mostly off-screen antagonists, Stahl at least left an impression that few of the series' bad guys have, and given the post-credit cutscene, it seems we may not be done with him just yet.
Welcome home, sir.
Speaking of which, that ending... the fuck? I suppose none of these games have really had neat, tied up in a little bow endings, with almost every one by design feeding into the conflict of the next, but I don't know, there's cliffhangers, and then there's and everyone's dead the end.
We just crushed an entire race of people!
As far as we know, those 16 ISA guys are still floating in space above Helghan, frozen corpses long since out of oxygen. And again, the fuck? So Sev and Rico just killed the planet? Remember earlier when I said it was a missed opportunity not to show civilians during Stahl's broadcast? How I wished for more signs of life on Helghan besides soldiers and spiders? This is why. We know that the planet has its civilians, the greatest victims of the regime, but this game failed to make that case before dropping its final bombshell. For all the average player knows from this game alone, yeah, no, this entire planet's just soldiers and spiders. Fuck 'em. It's a shame. Anyway, how about some multiplayer? Well, sorry, the servers were also shut down in 2018. Bot Zone again it is. The multiplayer here was, much like the campaign, a tuned up version of Killzone 2's, and it was fantastic. Besides Warzone returning from 2, there were 2 additional game modes, Guerrilla Warfare as a standard team deathmatch in smaller close quarters maps, and Operations, with these thematic, phased, objective-based battles with attackers pushing onwards through the map with each success, and defenders trying to stop them. This had by far the fewest maps, but it came with cutscenes featuring the players themselves, and was just a lot of fun. And hey, since we're talking about game modes, sidetracking from online multiplayer for a moment, there actually was an honest-to-god split-screen couch co-op mode for the campaign here too, with player 2 becoming none other than Natco. You son of a bitch! Back online, classes are the same as before, but with updated models, and on certain maps they actually have pilotable exosuits. Those crazy sons of bitches, they did it. Honestly, vehicular warfare is exactly what Killzone's multiplayer needed, and I just wish they expanded on it even further with tanks or any other vehicles too. With the server closure, the game's 3 DLC map packs, From the Ashes, Steel Rain and the Retro Pack, were delisted from the PSN store. I was able to reacquire the packs myself through my PSN download history, and with the exception of 2 maps, both of which contain jetpacks which I think were bot incompatible, all are still playable in Bot Zone, which is something at least. But other than that, if you're like me and loved this game's multiplayer, at least we have the memories.
Justice, freedom, against a twisted Helghast philosophy which values bloody death more highly than a peaceful life.
As a topic of discussion, this has been a long time coming. And while right after Killzone 3 might seem like a bit of a strange place to be finally having it, I wanted all of the major in-game evidence for my points presented before we got to it. We understand that the Helghast are dangerous. Visari's rhetoric led them to war, their militant xenophobic culture led to atrocities, but I want to take a deeper look. Beyond the aesthetics, what, if anything, allows us to correctly point at them and say, this be a fascism? But more importantly, how does this seemingly obvious question about fictional antagonists in a video game help us in reality? Well, maybe it won't. Maybe you can just take this as a bit of fun. But the thing is, outside the comfort of our escapist entertainment, there's no actual rules saying that this type of ideology will always present itself in the most obvious way. And to the average person, knowing fascism when you see it won't be as easy as pointing at the scary red, black and white flag. So, if nothing else, consider this an exercise in identifying fasci tendencies. The first thing to recognise about fascism is that it is fundamentally incoherent, simultaneously amorphous and difficult to define, and brain-deadeningly simple. Debatably, it doesn't even qualify as actual ideology. Socialism, for example, has a concrete definition, ignoring constant misuse.
Socialism is when the government does stuff.
Worker ownership of the means of production, democratic control over the workplace, and also there's like decommodification and stuff, but fuck knows I'm trying to explain that. Capitalism, another ideology with a concrete definition, private ownership of the means of production, as opposed to worker ownership or democratic control. Anarchism, the elimination of the state and hierarchies. Libertarianism, maximising individual autonomy and minimising state power. Bidenism, abolition of monarchy. I could go on, but the point is, fascism can't be succinctly defined, and is perhaps better described, in the words of Madeleine Albright, as a method or system rather than an ideology, or as I've come to think of it, as a set of symptoms rather than a set of tenets or policies. The Italian philosopher Umberto Eco's essay Ur Fascism is probably the most well-recognised and referenced collation of such symptoms. His 14 features of Ur Fascism, or eternal fascism, a blanket term for any and all forms the system might take, regardless of place in the world or time in history. So by rights should also apply to our 24th century extrasolar nation in question. However, Eco stresses in the essay that concerning these symptoms, just as with a cold, flu, or that other virus if you want to go there, one can be infected without necessarily experiencing all symptoms at once. And again, owed to the incoherence of the non-ideology, it can sometimes ultimately come down to degrees of fash, with no definitive line for how many symptoms you need to get the diagnosis. Even so, these 14 features seem to be as reliable a tool as we have for measuring a society, and should be taken as an early warning system. Feel free to try this at home with your own government! Unless of course it's too late for you, at which point you should probably turn off the video. Features 1 through 3. The cult of tradition, rejection of modernism, and cult of action. I merged these together because they hit on similar points of anti-science, anti-philosophy, and anti-intellectualism, in short and to the best of my understanding, and to be honest they're not super present in game. Eco writes that the cult of tradition leads to no advancement in learning. Truth has already been spelled out and we can only keep reinterpreting its obscure meaning. There's some religious implications here, but in practice this sees a rejection of philosophers and, tied in with other points, a rejection of logic, rationalism and enlightenment values. Note the rejection of scientific principles doesn't mean a rejection of technology, with fascist states often touting industrial or scientific advancements, usually militarily, but rather a contradictory rejection of the scientific method. For example, Germany was a global hub for philosophy, from Karl Marx's critiques on capitalism to the movement of logical positivism or empiricism. But following the Nazi takeover, these movements were essentially pushed out of Germany. Marxists, for obvious reasons, and the logical positivists for promoting so-called Jew science, with their empirical methodology able to poke holes in Nazi racial logic. I find this interesting with regard to the entire Helghast basis for, well, the Helghast. Remember that this racial distinction, the very name Helghast, was created by Visari as a political tool first and foremost, before any descriptor of biological reality. Though we haven't quite got here yet in the story, it seems, for all their physical characteristics, bald fuck, whatever genetic distinction there is between Helghans and the rest of humanity, it has been overplayed.
The virus is designed to be gene-specific. It was initially engineered to only target the Helghan genome. However, our doctors, with the help of Massar, have been able to adapt the coding to redesign it so it now attacked only Vectans. This has created somewhat of a debate among my colleagues. It seems our genomes are not as different as many Helghans would like to believe. Genetically, we are nearly identical to the Vectans. Even now, After decades of change, it seems we still have much in common.
Which brings us to the cult of action, marked by a don't think, just do mentality. Action having value in and of itself, with internal reflection, like a lot of things, being rejected. Manifesting an anti-intellectualism, whether through mistrust of academics or universities, often deemed breeding grounds for Marxists, or a rejection of studies, scientists and experts when they tell you to vaccinate your kids and wear a mask. Again though, not finding much relevant to our purely wartime view on Helghan, though the fact that the only place of learning we ever see is a military academy lends something to this point. But, moving on. 4. Disagreement is treason.
Re-educated.
Yeah, this one's a given. Again though, this can go beyond simply disobeying the state, but a rejection of even the tools that allow for the system to be critiqued in the first place, from philosophical methods to decent education. And again, though not there yet, we hear from Helghan scientists comparing, for military application, the genetics of Helghans and Vectans, expressing discomfort at their simultaneous exposure to empirical reality, and their expected obedience to Helghast doctrine and political correctness. After all, the entire Helghast state demands there be a difference because... 5. The Ur-Fascist must instill the fear of difference and appeal against the intruder.
We will make them realize the truth that the children of Helghan know in their hearts that our race, the Helghast nation, is the next step in the evolution of mankind. Helghan saw what was in every one of us, our strength and our indestructible spirit, and made it manifest. The great change was the rebirth of our people, a people fit to stride the stars and shatter our enemies.
Ego states plainly that the fascist is racist by definition, but this doesn't mean it must be explicitly written into law. Even hype man of fascism Benito Mussolini was, for a time, outspokenly anti-racist, in rhetoric at least. However, fascists are of course nothing if not incoherent, with him eventually signing the Italian Manifesto of Race, and there's quotes of him complaining about the Browns having more kids than us. Never heard that one before. The Helghast view of themselves as extra-human, above the rest of humanity, is clear, being at the forefront of their entire ideology. However, the appeal against the intruder goes beyond just supremacy, to the removal of others. This is harder to identify in-game, the I say invasion obviously notwithstanding. Even before VIII, Helghan was isolationist, and I doubt there were many Vectans choosing to live there. In fact, canonically, there's only one known non-Helghan living on the planet, that being the Vectan ambassador Sepp Harkin living in Puris with his Helghan wife and their son, up until Operation Archangel. This raises another question though. Throughout the series, we meet 3 half-Helghast characters, and their place socially has not, at this point, been clarified, with Haka at least achieving rank and status in the military before his defection. This is not, however, entirely without historical precedent, with fascism's contradictive nature and ideological incoherence raising its head again, this time within Nazi Germany, where despite the second-class status of half-black Germans and a sterilization program being committed against them in the Rhineland during 1937, they were still expected and called upon to fight once the war machine got rolling, making the men in this position simultaneously, according to Nazi beliefs, subhuman undesirables, and the prototypical German hero which all soldiers were elevated to, a la point 3 and point 11. 6. Appeal to the frustrated middle class, a class suffering from economic crisis or political humiliation from above, and fearful of social pressures from below. This is an interesting one, but lacking detailed insight on Vasari's early rise to power, it's difficult to provide evidence for. On the second part, to capitalise on the middle class's fear of a working class movement, whether Franco, Hitler or Mussolini, a fascist takeover is followed, if not preceded, by the banning of left-wing parties and independent trade unions, removing power from the working class, stamping out revolutionary sentiment and enforcing class collaboration. The idea that a hierarchical society is natural and all must work to maintain the status quo is a cornerstone of fascist doctrine. On whether the Helghast were anti-capitalist or corporate unfriendly, there isn't much of a debate, thanks to the appearance of our friend Johann Brimf Stahl. Rather, collaboration between state and corporate power is so intertwined in Killzone that not only does the chairman of Stahl Arms have a seat at the table of power, but Vasari himself was able to be simultaneously autarch and chair of the Vasari Corporation, the planet's second largest arms manufacturer and a heavy mining corporation.
He had seen for himself how the petricite that was at first used as a power source was developed and weaponized by none other than Scholar Vasari, the very same Scholar Vasari who had told the people that Vector profited from their suffering but none had profited from the Helghast suffering as much as Scholar Vasari did himself. The very same Scholar Vasari who spoke grandly of returning power to the people while in secret bestowing power on his associates.
So, assuming Vasari used the threat of a working class revolution to gain the approval of the middle class, where exactly in Killzone are all the mask-wearing working class revolutionaries? Unfortunately, we can only speculate. And I very much suspect any leftist sentiment which sprung up during the economic crisis of the 2330s has long since been re-educated by the time of the events of the game. However, fascists can still of course appeal to the working class using fear and rhetoric, through xenophobic blaming of the outsider for economic woes, and by adopting populist, even leftist messaging, i.e. return power to the people, or make insert nation here great again, for example. However, they'll only ever do this while assuring the middle class that they don't have to fear for their privilege, and the owner class that they too seek to profit. 7 and 8. The obsession with plot, and the simultaneous and contradictory held view of their enemies as both overwhelmingly powerful and pathetically weak. This one's probably my favourite, but I won't spend too long on it. Fascist societies are fundamentally paranoid of threats, internal and external, with conspiratorial thinking, often around international, or in our case, I guess, interstellar, plots against the race and nation. It's siege mentality, that the enemy is trying to undermine you at every turn. The most obvious go-to here is the Nazi obsession with the international Jewish plot. But anything from New World Order conspiracies to QAnon, or them putting chemicals in the water to turn the frickin' frogs gay, all tie into this. Now, am I calling Alex Jones a fascist? No, but it's a question of what sort of audiences conspiracy theorists tend to attract. That's not me just asking questions, by the way. There's a correct answer. Crap! The obvious analogue for us is the Helghast obsession with the ISA, an interstellar military-industrial cabal doing the bidding of a central Earth government, dedicated wholly to denying the Helghast people their rightful place in the universe. However, note that while Vasari's ire is almost always pointed towards this larger nebulous organisation, Helghan itself isn't at war with the ISA. They're at war with Vecta. But that's why the propaganda works. Framing the conflict as a struggle for survival against an overwhelming enemy, the entire Earth imperial framework against one world standing alone, is a far more compelling narrative.
The ISA, while they cower and snipe from beneath their veneer of civility and freedom, are soulless and hollow. They make their petty, mewling claims of liberty and righteousness. And all the while, they look upon the face of the Helghast with loathing and disgust. Mutant freaks fit only for killing. To the foe, we are less than human, but they will learn their mistake, my people.
Yet, and here's the fun part, to maintain the underdog status, the enemy must be existential, overwhelming, often international. Yet, simultaneously, they're weak, contemptuous, and easily crushed before the superior might of the fascist nation.
History does not long entrust the care of freedom to the weak or the timid. We shall not suffer the irresolute and spineless men of the ISA to dictate our path.
There's a heavy dose of victim complex in here too, which is particularly egregious and frustrating when often the most powerful institutions or individuals there can be will squeeze out crocodile tears about their own persecution.
Conservatives all across this country will be unable to speak, they'll be unable to do business, they'll be unable to be heard.
9. Life is permanent warfare. There is no struggle for life, but rather, life is lived for struggle. And pacifism is trafficking with the enemy.
Struggle is the father of all things, and true virtue lies in bloodshed. In the blood of our warriors comes the price we must pay. Blood alone moves the wheels of history.
The Helghast claim to only want to right a historic wrong by reclaiming Vecta. But to believe that the Helghast would stop there, could just stop there, seems as naive as Chamberlain's that Hitler would just stop after the Sudetenland. While Vasari speaks of a golden, peaceful future for the Helghast, that future cannot be attained since, to be a fascist, to be Helghast, warfare cannot end. The war economy that Helghan, like Nazi Germany, is built upon requires perpetual warfare to function. This very threat of a military-industrial complex actually being what President Eisenhower warned the United States was going to slip into during his 1961 farewell address. Militarism is the defining factor of the Helghast, summed up in the Radic Academy motto, if you want peace, prepare for war. Their military-first doctrine is actually comparable to the Songun policy in North Korea, in which the country's siege mentality, in a constant state of readiness from outside invasion, is used to justify the prioritised allocation of resources to military at the expense of all other aspects of society. So, Helghast militarises out of a sense of self-preservation from the outside, and after digging its economy into a place where war is the only thing propping up the state, conflict becomes inevitable. 10. Contempt for the weak. The leader, knowing that his power was not delegated to him democratically but was conquered by force, also knows that his force is based upon the weakness of the masses. They are so weak as to need and deserve a ruler. Every subordinate leader despises his own underlings, and each of them despises his inferiors. This reinforces the sense of mass elitism. Helghast society is rigidly hierarchical, with near complete disregard for those lower on the societal rung. Autarchs threaten commanders with death, commanders execute soldiers for minor infractions, and soldiers look down on the civilians as parasites. While rhetorically VIII seemed a true believer in the strength of the Helghast people right up to his dying breath, the man also dropped a nuke on his own city and died believing that he was the only thing keeping Helghast from dissolving into chaos, that the people of Helghast would fight and die to the last man, woman and child for the sake of his leadership. On top of narcissistic, it's difficult to read this as anything but veiled contempt. 11. The cult of heroism and the cult of death, where everybody is educated to become a hero. The Ur-fascist hero is impatient to die. In his impatience, he more frequently sends other people to death. Between what we already covered in cult of action and militarism, I don't think I need to add much more to this one.
The soldiers and warriors who burn with cold fire and unyielding resolve, never flinching before the guns of our adversaries. You seek reward in service alone.
12. Machismo, disdain for women, and intolerance and condemnation of non-standard sexual habits. Okay, so this might actually be one of the more difficult ones to actually find examples for, simply due to these games being entirely sexless in nature. To be honest, this is just one of those things with fiction. Like, for everything we know about the mechanics of a lightsaber or the philosophies of the Jedi, what's the Empire's policy on same-sex marriage? And yes, I know it's probably in Wikipedia somewhere, just you get my point. Some things just aren't covered in the world building. As for women in Helghast, there's a little more we can glean. So far, we've seen a grand total of one Lady Helghast, and looking only during VIII's reign, we'll learn of one other next game. Judging their place in society is difficult with so few to go on, VIII's daughter Hera being a visible exception thanks to her place among the elite, though the fact women are otherwise so invisible does in and of itself give us a clue as to their place in the world. Looking then to history, women in Nazi Germany were expected and encouraged to be wives, mothers, and little more, to raise the new generation of soldiers, and this is the trend for fascist regimes, with Franco's Spain reasserting traditional gender roles and banning women from military service following the Civil War, and Mussolini's Italy seeing women coerced into domestic lives. While we see exactly 0 women serving in the Helghast military, there was some speculation around the elite shock troopers, their frame and stance seeming to give off a more feminine vibe than the average Helghast soldier. However, combat dialogue identical to the regular old virgin shock trooper does put a nail in this theory. However, the case for women in the army is still not completely without basis. In Killzone Ascension, while fighting towards the irradiated evac point, Seth finds a photograph in the hands of a trooper he just killed, seeing on it a woman in elite shock trooper gear, smiling with her SMG in the nook of one arm and her combat helmet under the other. Plus, concept art for the capture trooper in Killzone 3 originally showed them to be female. It's also possible that with the war having moved to home turf, any gender restrictions once in place were relaxed, adopting a policy more like North Korea today or the Soviet Union during World War II, where women were able to become snipers, pilots, tank crews, as well as obviously less frontline roles. Of course, given fascism's roots in the 20th century, where traditional gender roles were the norm for even the most liberal democracies, and even the USSR, for all of its initial rhetoric, sliding backwards on the issue after the revolution, it is conceivable that with 300 years of human advancement, the so-called traditional gender roles as we know them are as archaic to the Helghast as medieval concepts of gender are to us today. Who knows, maybe they've gotten over gay and trans people now. Maybe everyone's gay in the future. Go full Greco-Roman, fascists are meant to love that shit. Like, I'm not saying anything, but Metrak and Kobar did spend a lot of time in each other's company. I'm just saying. 13. Selective populism. The people are conceived as a monolithic entity expressing the common will. The leader pretends to be their interpreter. As discussed, VIII will, like many fascists, rhetorically speak of giving power to, or representing the will of, the nebulous people. Now, this does not manifest in any kind of democratic control to gauge what the will of the people actually is, but rather the Helghast nation is deemed a collective. One hand, one heart, one soul, to whom VIII alone is the interpreter of their collective will. This is, of course, illogical, magical thinking, but it's used to consolidate power with the thinnest facade of legitimacy. Once again, this is a point which really speaks for itself, but it leads us, at last, to Echo's final symptom. 14. Newspeak. Now, this is a goodie. Anybody who's read Orwell's 1984, perhaps the same class we read Animal Farm, should know the term newspeak. Coined by Orwell in the book, it describes Oceania's use of truncated language, the purging of vocabulary, and the invention of new words, all with the intent to limit the linguistic tools necessary to allow for rational thinking. How can someone even begin to fight against their own oppression when, thanks to the elimination of the word itself, the concept of freedom is indescribable? Now, newspeak in the real world isn't quite so well defined, but the principle remains: the politicization of language for an express purpose to mislead and misinform. After all, what are lies when we have alt-facts? So, does the Helghast engage in newspeak? Absolutely. First of all, the very word Helghast, as we covered, was itself a political tool. But even more than that, have you noticed I haven't even touched on what the hell this is yet? This, the Helghan alphabet, is once again a creation of VIII's regime, and a blatant attempt not only to differentiate, isolate, and otherwise distance themselves from the victims, but to control and curtail expression and speech. While the specifics are unknown, the language not being fully functioning, and Guerrilla never really expanding on it, one horrifying little gem on the Killzone wiki states that in this new Helghan language, there exists no word for surrender. So, why did we just go through all that? Mostly because I don't know how to stop, but besides that, we are living through interesting times. Just as we've gotten done talking about how words can lose their power, words like fascism can, and arguably has, lost its descriptive power. Whether or not you personally consider yourself political, or take anything from this part of the video, in fact, if this happens to be your first time watching anything I've done, just know that this is not in any way my usual content. My best case hope is that you've gained an idea of the basic tools you, as a citizen of Earth, have at your disposal to identify this type of politic, regardless of whatever reskin it appears in. But at the very least, as people interested in games, and specifically world building these fictional settings, we've been able to use these tools to grade how well Guerrilla were able to craft an authentic fascist antagonist in the Helghast. With one slight problem. The Helghast are too fucking cool. In some of my earlier script notes, I had terms like consumer-friendly fascism and Nazi aesthetic only highlighted as something to be aware of. Star Wars' Galactic Empire, for example, which despite easily hitting most of the points on this list itself, can still be sold as Lego. The typical bad guy army who we understand are the villains for the sake of the story, but are never really shown or asked to think about the underlying idiotic, incoherent, or the outright embarrassing reasons why their systems should, and ultimately always would, fail. To Guerrilla's credit, they evidently crafted an authentic fasci system complete with the inherent cracks and failures within. But my nagging concern is that for every badass new tank design or trooper variant, villain or theme song, they didn't bring comparable attention to the inherent ridiculousness of it all. Who exactly but the Ur-fascists substituting sexuality with weaponry really needs a 300-meter tall walking death cannon?
Compensating.
Now, I'm not making an extra credits argument that the game paused before every mission to lecture at the player why Nazi's bad, but not everyone's going to be going into these games with my deliberately and ludicrously analytical mindset for this video. And while I had to dig a little too deep to find some of the evidence while going through those 14 features, which makes up the bulk of my actual criticism of the system, all the ahistorical stereotypes of Nazi super science and fascist technological and military supremacy were on full display. Killzone 3 especially. Now, is this really so harmful? Not really. But weeaboos exist, and to at least more than 0 people, the militarism, charismatic leader, and cool flag are enough to get them on board with something, unironically. So, what's the ideal? Can we still have our evil empires in fiction while making sure not to accidentally glorify the aesthetic? Surely yes, but there is debate on this, especially when it comes to satirizing these things. Is mockery an effective tool to combat fascists? I've heard arguments going both ways, and I think I've landed at a simple rule. No, Hitler isn't funny because Nazis are edgy and he had a silly mustache. He's laughable because people took him seriously while believing in literal fucking magic. On top of incoherent, anti-intellectual, and self-destructive, fascism is juvenile. While the ever-present threat of fascism and those who cheerlead it should never be taken lightly, with even the most bumbling autocrat capable of extreme harm, perhaps fascism, the non-ideology, should be more readily presented with the ridicule it rightfully deserves. During the same year as Killzone 3's release, development began in Guerrilla Cambridge Studio on a new handheld entry intended for Sony's upcoming PlayStation Vita, launching in 2012. This same year would also see the release of Killzone Trilogy on PS3, a repackaging of the first 3 mainline games with an HD remaster of the original. Meanwhile, back at Guerrilla Amsterdam, work began on the next main installment, intended for the soon-to-be-announced PlayStation 4. The console was revealed February 2013, with the first of several accompanying game announcements being a definitely actual gameplay this time trailer for Killzone Shadowfall, yet another technical showcase for Sony and, this time, a flagship launch title. But in the meantime, August 2013 saw the release of Killzone Mercenary on the PlayStation Vita. But I've never owned a PS Vita, so I guess we're kinda fucked again? Unless...
Hey, you! I don't suppose you have another Game Boy.
I have a Switch!
Right from its live-action announcement trailer, Mercenary promised to be a very different entry in the series, showing for the first time the perspective of someone outside the ISA, a private military contractor doing work for both sides. This premise alone is interesting, but having never played the game, I honestly didn't know what to expect going in. The game opens with a very brief history of things, before bringing us up to the present day and our first mission on southern Vecta at the height of the Helghast invasion. Yep, this game goes back in the timeline, overlapping events in Liberation and Killzone 2. With the ISA on the brink, they've turned to the horrendously named Phantom Talon Corps, which we, Earthborn former ISA soldier Aaron Danner, have signed on with. Tasked with rescuing a captured ISA admiral, we're sent to the city of Diortum, currently under siege by one of Metrak's subordinates, Colonel Kratek. And almost as soon as we enter the game, good god, that is more like the Vecta that I imagined. Technology has caught up. Still on the same engine and art style as Killzone 2 and 3, I'm loving this so far. You've got to understand, I'm playing this in 2020, and the last time I had a game in this visual continuity was 2011, Shadowfall being a whole new engine and whatnot. I'm reveling in everything, being so familiar yet brand new. Again, Vecta on this engine? It's gorgeous. The Helghast, meanwhile, are using the Killzone 3 models, but they've been recolored to better match those from the original game. Nice touch. We are introduced to a new mechanic. Using the Vita's touchscreen and quick directional swipes for melee or sneak attacks, we have the option for a special sneak takedown on officers to initiate an interrogation, where we use these swipes to slowly torture them. Huh. Yeah, I think we just violate the Geneva Convention.
Geneva? What planet do you think you're on?
While not usually mandatory, interrogations provide intel which are themselves an in-game collectible, some of which are really sneakily hidden and are a great source of lore, those on this first mission just really re-establishing things we already know, Helghan, Vecta, VIII, as well as this game's major players. Colonel Kratek, sent here specifically to capture the ISA Admiral, the Admiral in question, Alex Gray, who was leading an experimental weapons program here named Project Eschaton before the war, and finally Anders Benoit, our boss, who seems like a real nice fella. Merc tries to give us the old do it loud or quiet options, but for once stealth is actually viable, taking out cameras and stealth killing troopers, and at times objectives can fork, such as in this first area, we need to gain access to a control room by either blowing open the door with C4, alerting the entire building, or we can find an alternate way to open the ventilation system and lob a gas grenade in. Between these branching paths and the optional special contracts you can accept on repeat playthroughs for specific challenge runs in the method and time to complete each mission, there is a lot of replayability here. Though, honestly, when just shooting everyone dead is as easy as it is here, there's not much incentive to do it stealthily outside of these contracts. To be blunt, the AI's back to being thick as mints. I don't know what it is about the Helghast forces during the invasion of Vecta. I mean, the AI was fine in the last two games. Maybe it's the air. To be honest though, I'm actually a little grateful for the dumbing down from the PS3 entries, if nothing else than to counterbalance the extra challenge of trying to play an FPS on a handheld console. Speaking of which, considering this was my first time playing a PS Vita, technically, I have to say I'm pleasantly surprised. A first-person shooter isn't exactly the first thing I imagine playing well on a system like this, and while I am suffering from thumb cramp pretty quickly into each play session, I'm impressed by how fluidly the game actually plays. So while having dumbed down enemies does make it a bit more of a run and gun, it kind of works to its favour. We eventually reach Grey, being interrogated by Kratek, who distractingly lacks any voice distortion despite being yet another masked villain.
You think you're better than us? With your talk of freedom and sacrifice?
It's weird. Anyway, before we can hack these doors, he gases some POWs, shoots Grey and escapes. Thankfully, turns out Grey had a family history of getting shot in the head, so survives long enough for our buddy Ivanov to get her to an evac, fighting her way to an elevator and then through a tank outside the building's main entrance.
Good job, gentlemen. Our price just went up.
The hostage we were paid to rescue got shot in the face, are you sure? During the rescue, we saw a Helghast cruiser crash in the river, and our next mission is to sabotage the thing before it can repair and escape with some experimental weapons ransacked from the Admiral's Project Eschaton facility. Now, I realise my capture footage isn't great, obviously coming from a small screen, but I can't get over how good this game looks. Sure, there's some pixelation around the edges, and particle effects are especially bad, but it's so vibrant and colourful, and so far the environmental design has been on point. I will never tire of fleet combat. Whoops. Being a mercenary, this game has a point-based currency system, rewarded for every kill, mission and contract completion, with bonuses for knife kills, headshots and scavenging ammo. These points can be spent at supply crates, where Blackjack, our friendly neighbourhood stereotypical shady Russian black market arms dealer, sells us weapons, armours, gadgets and ammo. Though if I'm being honest, between this game's ease and my stinginess, I barely bought a thing through this. Like, I swear to God, the AI isn't even trying anymore. I honestly feel kinda bad killing them. Aboard the cruiser, we see some unarmed Helghast technicians, making this actually the first game to include civilians in a combat area, and we're to hack a few terminals involving this simple but effective minigame, using key shapes to try to build the pattern on screen, and with seconds to do so, combat still possible and often multiple layers of firewall to peel back, it can put the pressure on. Hacking open the ship's reactor shielding to let Ivanov set charges, he becomes trapped inside. With no way to free him and the chamber already filling with atoms, steam and other nuclear bric-a-brac, we're forced to leave him behind while the ship explodes, 46 seconds early. The story skips forward 2 years, with Admiral Grey back on her feet leading the first wave of Operation Archangel's counter-invasion of Helghan. Of course, we know how this goes, with the first fleet obviously meeting resistance from ground-to-orbit arc cannons. With the ISA floundering as usual, we're sent in to disable an arc battery off the coast of Puris. And on our way in, we meet our new partner, Carol, and he's dead, before fighting our way up the island chain to destroy the weapons. At this point, I figured I'd better try some of the other weapons in this game, choosing the M66 machine pistol because it's been good in the past. However, while silenced, I found the time to kill with this really poor, and thus it would never be used again. This mission also introduces the Vanguard special abilities, purchasable power-ups from personal shields to special weapons, with the freebie in this case being a shoulder-mounted aimbot, where on activation you just tap enemies on your touchscreen and they die. With the invasion back on track, we're sent to evacuate the VIII ambassador Sepp Harkin and his family from the embassy in Puris. While they're said to have a Helghan bodyguard, the invasion has nullified their political immunity, and what's more, a scientist working for Kratek, Dr. Savage, is at the embassy too, seeking to defect. With the battle scene raging on over the city, we arrive at the embassy with Benoit giving us the old "we got to have money" before ditching us. The embassy courtyard is littered with protest signs and banners. However, while there may not be any Helghan protesters around anymore, Kratek's forces are. But more importantly than that, I find out that the silenced Style 52 is now my favourite gun. It's silenced, but it also actually kills things. The VIII embassy is a great location just in concept alone. Helghan architecture with an attempted VIII stamp on it. But the real reason I love this level is because here we meet the single best character in the entire fucking franchise.
Shooting women and children! Call yourself soldiers!
We find the bodies of Harkin and his wife already murdered, but their bodyguard, Boris, is holding the line to protect their son. Need I even say any more to describe how much of a badass Boris is?
Killing civilians, that's not soldiering. That's the lowest of the low. I'll help you get the boy out. I promised his father.
So, not only is Boris a big boy, but he's chill as fuck, and takes his role as bodyguard so seriously he'll defend the family against his own people. Boris is a good boy.
ISA using mercs to do their dirty work. Typical Vectans. Yellow as piss.
Teaming up with him to get the Harkin boy, Justice, out, the rest of the level becomes an escort mission for our tank, while we play DPS. Justice is a terrible support meanwhile, but thankfully Boris can carry the team. Rocket launchers are the only real threat, killing him after so many hits, so you've really got to be on the ball to take them out as soon as they appear, leaving him to deal with all the other infantry. Not that it's a game over if Boris goes down, but you'll never be able to live with yourself.
Still here, kid. I don't mean to die fighting beside a merc.
What about side by side with a friend?
Piss.
Yeah, I know I did that joke already, but it's been a long video. We fight through a dropship and wave after wave of enemies, trying to reach an elevator to the docks, where Justice thinks there should still be one boat left, with Dr. Savage already having fled the embassy in the other. Assuming Boris survives till this point, he gives us the old, "It is too late for me, son," and sends us down alone, while he holds them off. No, Boris wasn't a good boy. He was a man. Escaping in a... Christ, was there anything that man didn't produce? We head to an island off the coast where Savage has fled to await rescue. This island's home to a slum city built around some natural petricite pillars, extending like volcanoes out of the sea, with us immediately witnessing some police brutality with a civilian held at gunpoint by a Helghast cop, a unique unit to the game which I really like the design of, wearing the blue uniform of Helghast security rather than military black, though I have one question of, is there anything that fucker didn't produce? What, he owns the police too? We eventually find Savage in a local bar, the game taking this opportunity to show us actual, regular Helghan life. Real civilians and all. Love it! This whole city, in fact, has a great look and vibe, you know, for a dystopian hellhole, I mean, and kudos again to the designers for creating another environment, and another urban one at that, distinct from Killzone 2, but still clearly of this world.
You must get me to Admiral Grey. If she has the trigger and Kratek the virus, it's stalemate. The only way to end this madness.
Whoa, hold on. You wanna run all that about a virus by me again? Just then, the bar is raided by the local fuzz, and we hold the fort till Justice and Savage escape, before fighting through the slum pursued by police transports and arriving at the evac too late to see Admiral Grey leaving without us, Savage and the boy in tow. Rude. Benoit eventually comes to save us, and with no hard feelings, Grey gives us another mission, to destroy an offshore refinery powering the remaining arc cannons, with the one small caveat being that this refinery is built right on top of the unevacuated city we just visited. Still, on questioning, our character heads in with an on-rails shooty section before sneaking around the water cooling plant full of civilian workers. Disabling cooling opens the reactor shields, allowing Benoit to give us a lift while expositing the whole Savage situation as. Apparently, while he was helping to develop a bioweapon for Kratek, he planned to deliver the viral trigger to the ISA, forcing a stalemate since neither party had both components. The only problem with this plan being that Admiral Grey has decided, fuck that, she wants both.
The Admiral won't be happy till every damn Hig is dead or dying. This war is gonna end soon, and end bad. Just gotta work the angles, make it pay.
Money, money, money.
Benny Boy drops us in the reactor core, where we have a challenging fight, at least by this game's standards, against troopers and drones while waiting for the reactor rods to be exposed. However, just as we complete the mission, Benjamin calls us to let us know he's going to go ahead and double-cross us now, leaving us to die in the explosion.
So, Mercenary, you destroyed my refinery. I should let you die there, but I'm prepared to offer you a way out. I suggest you take it.
You heard the Colonel, get it! Mark is secure, Colonel!
Good. Make him comfortable.
So, now things get interesting, as Kratek briefs us on the Admiral's plan to extract the virus's location from Savage and, with the trigger, use it to target all of Helghan. Now, while we are by no means off of Kratek's shit list, Grey's taken the Vectan Embassy as her HQ, and her inside knowledge of the building, and lack of loyalty to the ISA, makes us the ideal candidate for the mission, to infiltrate, retrieve the trigger, and kill Savage before he talks.
Nervous, Mark? Don't be. Kratek sent us to get this job done. We'll be right beside you. Here we go! For Helghan!
Oh, yeah, sure, for Helghan, and all that. Well, this is nice. Assaulting the embassy from the roof, my Helghast squad mates all immediately walking into trip mines, we get the full switcheroo, fighting ISA soldiers and rescuing Helghast prisoners. Cool. This is the closest the series has ever come to fighting for the Helghast, and while I'm not exactly here voluntarily, I'm happy to play along for now. After getting by some cloaked snipers, we break in to see... What is that? What is that? You bastards! Boris was a good boy, you sons of bitches! Okay, disregard any criticism I ever made of the Helghast. Fuck the ISA! We find Savage under guard in the ambassador's office, and after putting Kratek on mute, he gives us the combination lock for the virus vault, apparently aboard a mobile research facility out in the Badlands, and while Grey is already on her way, without the code she'll be having to cut her way in. We also learn a few other things. Firstly, Kratek's bioweapon was based on material stolen from Admiral Grey's own Project Eschaton, originally an anti-Helghan virus being developed as a deterrent before the war even started. Secondly, that his alterations meant it could be used to target either Helghans or Vectans exclusively. And finally, that the viral trigger is now inside Justice, being a plasmid which he injected into him before fleeing the embassy before, an attempt to prevent it from falling into Kratek's hands. Once we have all this information, we're given the choice to either kill him as instructed, or walk away. Leaving the embassy, we take on an EXO before accessing bridge controls to allow Kratek's ground forces to secure the area. With us alone knowing the access code to the vault, we're sent in with Helghast forces to the mobile research base, quite literally built into the back of a massive low-altitude cruiser. During the assault, we get a call from Blackjack, our friendly neighbourhood war profiteer, who says he'll be helping us along with this mission, claiming only that he has a vested interest in how it pans out. Fair enough. After witnessing some more war crimes, we eventually come to the vault door, ISA still struggling to cut inside, but with the code, we can head straight on in and grab the virus. Whoops. But before we can escape, Grey and her forces breach the vault, and all that's left is for us to kill her. Little nitpick here, but I hate how immersion breaking it is to have normal human boss fights, not even body armor, just regular dress uniform, but they can tank 27 rounds to the face. I mean, yes, we did establish you have resistance to headshots, but like, wear a helmet at least? This is just silly. Just die, lady! Rescuing Justice, Blackjack reminds us that Kratek be cray-cray, will definitely kill us as soon as he has the boy, and will absolutely use the virus against Vecta. Now, of course, Blackjack's interest in all this is hardly humanitarian, only that a genocide either way will end the war too quickly, and ending wars are bad for business. Is anyone in this story not a cunt? Besides Boris.
So, Merc, you delivered what I want after all. But this time, you don't get paid. There's a price for betrayal, too.
Easy, Danner. Play this smart and you can still get out of here alive. Just give me the boy and the virus. Put the boy and the virus on the open market. Sell to the highest bidder. Let market forces settle this war.
Oh, of course, he's a libertarian. While this is going on, the red dust nuclear detonation can be seen over Pyrrhus in the distance, bringing us right in line with the end of Killzone 2 as we're left to take on Bernard and the rest of his Talon Company whatever mercs. Again, I've barely spent a penny in this game, but given there's no characters left to double cross us and nothing left to save for, I go ahead and buy the most expensive gun available. This might be the most boss fight of the entire series, and it's... whatever. Firing on his intruder brings him to ground, shooting these petricite rods stuns him, and finally unloading into his unprotected bald head, we take him down. Board a dropship, destroy the virus, and escape.
I knew you could get us out, Danner. What now?
Huh. You know, that's a very good question. Killing old Benji kinda burned our bridge with Metal Gear Phantom Pain whatever core. We are wanted criminals by both the ISA and Helghast. The ISA fleet, even if we could explain ourselves, are on track for a paddle-in over the next few hours, and this entire planet has about 6 months till it gets recode. Hey, Blackjack, buddy, could you, pick us up, or...
The virus is destroyed, and the war goes on. The nuke Vizari stole from the ISA just added a little spice. Plus, sales of anti-rat drugs went through the roof. Good thing I stockpiled, and not just the meds. Trust me, this one is going to run and run. So, I take the liberty of wiping your tracks to give you a little head start. This way, the kid goes back to being just a kid again. Maybe. And you get to fight another day. But only for a price. Yes.
Cunt. And that was Killzone Mercenary. I gotta say, I'm pleasantly surprised. Maybe it just helps being fresh for me, but I had a great time playing this one. Okay, the story is short and, yeah, pretty predictable throughout. When I first heard about the game, I imagined it being more episodic, maybe more spread out across the timeline, with more back and forth between taking contracts from the ISA and the Helghast, but what we got is fine. The screenshots and trailers showed neon-lit cities, nothing like those in Killzone 2, and it made me hope we'd explore more places around the planet. Perhaps the only ever alluded to Constantine City, where Purus' civilians and the Helghast reserve fleet spend most of Killzone 2. But the locations we got were interesting and holy shit beautiful, especially those in the first couple of missions. In terms of characters, look, I know Killzone has never been exactly S tier here, but I swear they are usually better than this, right? Our squad mates? Like, who even? Shades, who died 2 missions in. Carol, the main villain whose name I changed half a dozen times in the script because I've genuinely forgotten what it was. Chris Benoit, whose entire character arc was, I like money and being a dick. Oh look at that, I've betrayed you. For money. And dick. A step up from there though are Grey and Kratek, who both work as what they represent, being two sides of the same coin, Helghast and ISA, locked in a cycle of vengeance and destruction, both culpable and both fueling the other's justification for why the other must be destroyed. But of the two, Kratek actually ends up being the bigger letdown, after acting all big brain only to get shot in the back by the least trustworthy bloke in the universe. Thankfully, at the top of the pile though, we have the one blazing bright spot in this game. In one C. Borashek, a Helghan, and a man too damn good for the world he lived in. But really, these are my only major criticisms, and while the PS Vita never really exploded onto the scene, making this surely one of the least played entries in the series, it nevertheless set a high bar for shooters on the platform, with, if you'll believe it, people still playing multiplayer to this day. Yeah, believe it or not, this one hasn't had its servers shut down yet, albeit you'll be lucky to find them even half full, but they're playable. Now, I didn't actually capture any footage of my time online, simply from uncertainty as to how the PlayStation Network might respond to me accessing to it via my homebrew Gameabomination Do Switch. Maybe I'm being a little paranoid, but 40 seconds of footage, not exactly worth me losing my account over. However, assuming you can get online, you'll find team and solo deathmatch modes, the latter known as Mercenary Warfare being a first for the series, and of course there's offline bot zone as well for the day those servers are inevitably closed. Mercenary holds an interesting place in the series. While perhaps not the most cinematic, poignant, or in any way the smartest game in the series, it does mark the first time within the content of the game itself that the mask slips, where the grey morality of this universe is not subtext, but just text. And it being here of all places where that happens makes perfect sense. We are, after all, playing for the first time as an outsider looking in on the conflict, able to view and judge both sides in a way neither could view themselves. This does bring us to the subject of Blackjack though, whose final message of "so long as the war continues, the money keeps rolling in, smiley face," was a little uncomfortable. But, as we just said, there is no good side in this war, is there? And again, have any of these games ended on a note even close to uplifting? Either way, the seemingly endless conflict does indeed continue, and with the PlayStation 4's release just 2 months after Mercenary, the next and final Killzone game would launch along with it. And as it turns out, while intentionally or not, Mercenary might have been as much of a tonal bridge as a console one between the PS3 era of the franchise and what comes next, preparing us for an era of post-war reflection, cynicism, and where the facade of wartime heroism and good versus evil has finally worn away. We open with the final moments of Killzone 3.
The war between the Vectins and the Helghast ended in seconds. They call it the Terracide. 1 billion lives lost in the Petrocite fires that swept Helgen's surface, reducing it to nothing more than a lifeless rock. In the days that followed, an uneasy truce was negotiated and a settlement was reached. The survivors were to be given refuge on another world. Vecta, home of those responsible for Helgen's destruction. Half of the planet was given over to the survivors, and the Vectins that lived there were forced to leave. This was no longer their home. This was New Helgen.
Right off the bat, this opening cutscene doesn't explain some things clearly. Remember that this was a PS4 launch title and many people's introduction to the series. But even for those familiar with the games, there are questions. Questions like, why the fuck is Vecta giving half of their planet to the Helghast? Why are Vectan citizens immediately getting gunned down in the streets by Helghast troops? In fact, why the fuck does Helghast still have a military? Allow me to try and clarify a few things. Without perfect knowledge of the timeline, the intro gives the impression that we are, a few weeks after the Terracide, the name given to Helghan's destruction. I prefer the Ricoing personally. But no, when the game opens in the home of Lucas Kellen, a Vectan child stuck with his dad on the Helghan side of the newly drawn border, it's timestamped as 2370, a whole 10 years since the last game. As described, a truce was negotiated in 2361, with Helghan survivors given asylum on Vecta and other ISA-aligned colonies. While peaceful integration and cohabitation was attempted, lingering animosity prevailed, and while a soft border had already been drawn north to south around the planet, the Helghast declared their side the self-governing state of New Helghan in 2361. However, it wasn't until violence between Vectans and Helghans continued through to 2364 that construction began on a wall, taking around 3 years to complete and becoming, ironically, the only time both governments have ever come together in a joint endeavour. Progress? Then on top of that, add another 3 years of diplomatic gridlock, and the border wall is finally being closed on December 27th, 2270. So, point is, it's not exactly been an overnight takeover. It does however really make me question our dad's parenting skills to leave it to the absolute last minute before heading for the border. Honestly dude, if you get yourself shot, you kinda deserve it. Irresponsible. Having a wee look around our bedroom, since we're not exactly in a rush, there's a bunch of Easter eggs. Hey, I have that figure. Of particular note is this Robo-Scorpion hologram, which as far as I can tell seems to be an early version of the Corruptor from the at this time still in development Horizon Zero Dawn, though the final design does look a lot different. However, spending too long admiring the scenery will get us, a small child, shotgunned in the face, so heading a little quicker outside, the game immediately showcases its absolutely stunning visuals, built on Guerrilla's own new at this time Decima engine, which would later be used for games including Until Dawn, Death Stranding, and of course, Horizon. While going through what amounts to a stealth tutorial, we meet up with a soldier introducing himself as Sinclair, a shadow marshal like Luger from Killzone 1, and he agrees to try and help us reach the border.
It's okay, he's just stuck.
Not if anything to say about it.
Well, never let a good corpse go to waste, I guess. Let's discuss design. So the new Helghan military has clearly advanced over the years, with an armour design even more complex than the Phase 2 troopers of the past. Following my scheme, we could call these Phase 3, and while they are beautiful models, no denying that, and a decent enough design in and of themselves, I do think they've lost a lot of the original Helghast character. Very little of that World War inspiration remains, with something much more, hate to say it, generic sci-fi. But from an in-universe perspective, I can accept it, a smaller, defense-focused, better trained and equipped, and ironically more ISA-like military, making sense given the time passed and proximity between the two cultures. Before reaching the wall, we're spotted by a Helghast probe and Dad is shot by a patrol. Just as it seems we'll be next, Sinclair out of nowhere is taking them out.
Well, looks like you're gonna have to stick with me, kid. Come on. We'll be okay once we get to the other side of the wall. Come on.
Carrying us the rest of the way, we cut to a montage of events, taken under Sinclair's wing as a kid, graduating from the Shadow Marshal Academy, and eventually coming under his command, all while being proselytised that one day we'll take all of Vecta back. The cutscenes aren't done yet, as we cut to 2390, where a now 27-year-old field agent Lucas has been captured while on a mission in Helghast territory.
You have no idea how sickening this is to us. Forced to live here, alongside the people who destroyed our planet. And then there are people like you, Lucas Kellen, judging us, treating us like we are the criminals.
Embracing the new Cold War dynamic of the game, we're led out to Space Glenica Bridge, where we're part of a prisoner exchange, the Vectans having likewise captured a Helghan spy. The exchange is interrupted by shots from the Helghan side, and we attempt a quick-time escape during the confusion, only to be downed, but spared, by the Helghast spy. Led to safety by our troops, we finally reach the opening bloody credits. Talk about excessive cutscenes. So, besides being absolutely beautiful and an obvious tech demo, this is the first game, besides Mercenary, not to be scored by Joris de Man. I understand the change. A stirring orchestral score may not really fitting the spy thriller vibe they're obviously going for, but I don't know. We went from some of my favourite video game themes of all time to something kinda forgettable. Also, I know I said this in my 2017 Horizon Zero Dawn review, but this game's title is awful. Like, what does it even mean? Just call it Killzone 4, for fuck's sake. We're taken, again via cutscene, to the headquarters of the VIII Security Agency, VSA, for debriefing following a release and immediate rebrief to go sneaking back across the border again. Sinclair, give the boy a fucking break. Lucas asks about the other spy in the exchange, but all we know is that she's a half-Helghan codenamed Echo, and that the Helghan Chancellor VIII personally authorised the trade. Yes, that's right, Chancellor VIII. We'll get to that. Tensions are apparently boiling over, and Sinclair, believing a political solution is impossible, has been sending recon over the border to find evidence of Helghast military build-up, to push the VIII government into making a preemptive strike. However, one such recon team has been shot down, and we're needing to rescue the crew and destroy evidence of the crash. So, after only 24 minutes, we finally come to the actual game. As we should expect, this is more of a stealth shooter this time around. So, starting with nothing more than a combat knife, we head through an old hydroelectric tunnel to try and reach the Helghast side of the wall. Like many of the previous games, there are collectibles, but with far more variety here. From newspaper clippings, S tier, to audio logs, D. Intel dossiers, B. And finally, a state-produced Helghan comic series, which just... What? Point is, there's a ton of exploration to be done on these levels, with this first mission in particular being extremely freeform. Using a tactical echo, we get Batman Arkham Detective Vision. But it's gamed in a way where the D-pad is held to maximise its radius, but maxing out completely creates an audible feedback alerting nearby enemies. We sneak upon our first actual enemy, and I really like this design. Just like in Mercenary, the Helghast police have a blue uniform distinguishing them from the military, but it's very functional even with its sci-fi LED vest text. Our first objective is an airdropped package containing our Owl drone, little robobuddy who will be helping us throughout the game, along with our primary weapon. Climbing to an overlook, we see the recently constructed Scholar VIII memorial statue. While maybe not the Helghast Empire, the man still casts a literal shadow over New Helghan, seen below, contrasted against Vecta City to the west. But from here we can also see the fairly large and open main mission area. Descending the overlook down to it using the PS4's touchpad to select Zipline for one of our Owl's 4 modes: Attack, Shield, Zipline and Stun. Searching for the crash site and its missing crew, and then disabling AA towers and communications at various points around the park, it ultimately ends up being a fairly lengthy introductory mission, with a trophy for doing the whole thing without raising the alarm. Which I could have sworn I managed to do here, meticulously picking off the guards one by one, but apparently not, I guess. There are points where this openness becomes a problem though. Ziplining up and down this half-collapsed building while chasing the teleporting sniper I stepped off what seemed like just another small ledge into an instant death trigger, which... why? I could have pretty easily just climbed back out again. You didn't need to send me back 10 minutes to the last fucking checkpoint. But either way, having completed all these prerequisites, we raid the main base with the recon team to hijack an overlord. It does stretch my suspension of disbelief though that a shootout of this scale doesn't immediately just trigger a war. I mean, like, imagine if a bunch of NATO troops shot up an East German base at the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis. You'd think someone would notice that. But after an extended shootout, Thunder Punch, we board a dropship and make our completely inconspicuous getaway. Yeah, no one will notice that. Using the recovered recon team intel, we learn that a VIII scientist, Dr. Massar, is attempting to defect to the Helghast, and we're sent to the ISA cruiser Cassandra, a bioengineering black site where Massar was developing an anti-Helghast deterrent. If that sounds familiar, yes. Aboard the Cassandra, we get some fun with Zero-G, and then some absolute not fun as the place is a biohazard horror scene. And given the state of reality right now, we don't need this. Nah, too easy. Our objectives are to restore reactor power and plot a course for the sun from the bridge. You can do them in either order, and it's entirely devoid of combat, being more of a puzzle, moving a limited number of petricide capacitors around to open doors or power reactor rings, and all this while gathering clues about what actually happened here. The ship is VIII, but there were Helghan support staff aboard, maintenance, cleaners or the like, but soon enough these Helghans became test subjects while Massar's team began developing a bioweapon targeting their race. Again, We eventually start coming across spider mines, indicating that we aren't alone here, and right enough, we eventually encounter Helghast. And with the ship now on course for the sun, we've defined Dr. Bassar before the Helghast do, arriving at her abandoned lab.
This is what you do? Experimenting on us? You disgust me.
I came here to destroy this.
Don't lie to me. You came here to bury the truth. Wasn't destroying Helgen enough? I will not see any more innocents die.
More quick-time events, and, you know, I wonder what happens if you actually just don't try. That was a hesitation. She was trying to let us win. Echo escapes, and with the Doctor in Helghast's custody, we race through the disintegrating ship to retrieve her. Direct sunlight burns both us and enemies, making shooting off shutters an effective way of clearing walkways, though can limit our own movements. Hey, door buddies. A final audio log on this level details Bassar's change of heart, realising that genociding Helghans is wrong.
That's good.
And that we really ought to be genociding the Vectins.
That's bad.
Watching the Helghast cruiser leave without us, we are sucked out into the vacuum of space, where we are rescued by our own ship before we absolutely, definitely, instantly vaporize come the fuck on. Meanwhile, aboard the Helghast ship, Bassar correctly clocks on to Echo only being half Helgan, rubbing this fact in her face because she's apparently a fucking weirdo like that. Back on Vecta, we return to the VSA, via a much prettier dropship design, in a whole sequence you might recognise, even without playing the game, from early reveal trailers before the PS4's launch. The whole thing, again, just feeling like a technical showcase, with impressive vistas of the whole city.
Sorry, sir, just a formality.
Oh no, I look like a right cunt. There's a few things we can find here just walking around. News reports apparently mystified about the destruction of the VIII monument, and newspaper articles which are as always a world-building goldmine, usually always including some media spin relating to our previous mission, as well as ongoing side stories told issue to issue, such as the Helgan Worker Party takeover of Gyre, another colony who took a large number of Helgan refugees as cheap labour and, following the death of several hundred in an industrial accident, is experiencing major unrest. And the story of a Vectin actor facing backlash over his uncovered Helgan heritage, with the leader of the Vectin Independence Party demanding he take a public blood test to prove his innocence. If I'm honest, some of these off-screen side plots seem more interesting than the actual game. Before we can enter the building, a bomb blast knocks us on our feet, coming to amidst the wreckage to see what looks like ISA troopers executing survivors, before decloaking to reveal... Garfield? I'm sorry, I really don't like the look of these guys, never have. Combat begins, taking care not to hit the still fleeing civilians, as we clear what's left of the lobby before descending through the lower levels. Oh, hold on. Average sound, props for the physics, shatter effect, acceptable, I give it a 7 out of 10. We meet Sinclair topside and learn of other simultaneous attacks across the city being perpetrated by a terrorist group known as the Black Hand. It's possible to have read reports of them in previous missions, the new Helgan state media denouncing them as extremists, but the distinction is lost on Sinclair.
Should have gone in first. Never given them a chance. Blood's on their hands now.
To be honest, I'm not a big fan of these long, first-person perspective cutscenes. I'd trade whatever immersion they're supposed to bring for something more animated, or at least do a Half-Life and give us control while we're here, some kind of interaction. For real, 50% of this flight has Sinclair just staring out the door while Lucas is being too awkward to make any conversation.
It's time for us to step up. You hear me?
Yes, sir.
Sir!
We're dropped onto some monorail tracks where the Black Hands are attempting to hijack trains. It's a fun little obstacle course, fighting dudes between bullet trains. After clearing the trains of hostiles, we find one of them has been turned into a bomb, on course for Central Station. Jumping back to the dropship, we shoot the train off its tracks before being taken to an apartment building identified as the source of a looping Black Hand broadcast of their leader, Vladko Tyran, who Sinclair wants taken out, hostages or no. This final phase of the mission goes full Rainbow Six Siege as we're given alternate routes to breach, rappelling through a skylight directly above them or anywhere else on the roof, and clearing the area of hostiles, being careful not to hit any hostages through these thin destructible walls. With the last hostage rescued, we're informed that Tyrann's on the move, and we cutscene abseil into another one of these unwinnable encounters, which I'd almost rather were just third-person cinematics like the previous games, so it isn't simultaneously trying to immerse and remove all agency from the player. Pursuing a very scripted Tyrann, he escapes, irrespective of a subordinate ISA dropship, and we get a pretty, but again, wholly inconsequential chase through the city, ending with more incredibly slow quicktime.
But it's in your nature, so lose.
Wait, hold on. Thanks for waiting. Tyrann escapes across the border, and our new mission is to cross the wall, find and eliminate him, leading us to go undercover among an apparent wave of people migrating to New Helghan. To be honest, I wasn't paying that much attention to things my first time playing, being frankly a little lost in the plot and finding some of it lost in translation, but it seems that the political situation has deteriorated following these attacks, to the point where Helghan nationals, asylum seekers and even half Helghan Vectans are being deported. Freedom? We get some more thrilling gameplay cutscene interaction as we wait in line at customs. But after that, we finally get our first proper look at New Helghan. The refugees to be arrived with are chastised as traitors by border security, them or their parents having likely defected to Vecta before the wall was finished. The skyline is smoggy with heavy industry, with a constant stream of containers shipped to and from cruisers above, likely raw material from Helghan, such as petrocite, still an essential fuel source. Forced aboard a train along with all the other involuntary repatriates, we set off a miniature EMP and make our escape into the city slums to meet our contact. Now, unless you're a complete bastard or don't care about the trophy, extra care needs to be taken not to hit civilians when you, an armed madman, are inevitably spotted by the police. But, as with past stealth areas, your owl can disable alarms to prevent reinforcements. But now is probably the time to actually talk about what's going on with New Helghan, especially its new Chancellor, Hera Vazari. This is in fact the daughter we briefly saw in Killzone 3, who spent the remainder of the war on Gyre, avoiding the power struggle and the terroricide, remaining in hiding for 20 years protected by remnants of Vazari's government, these same remnants having since gone on to found Gyre's own aforementioned Helghast party, before returning herself to New Helghan and becoming, not its autarch or empress, but Chancellor. Indeed, we don't know much about the actual form of New Helghan's government, only that it's described as a single-party Helghast state, but the power of the Chancellor is not absolute, with it being implied that by now she's little more than a figurehead, with no real control over the military and a fragile grip on power. Considering the game's Cold War motifs, we're very likely using a German political model here, with, for example, the Chancellor of the Federal Republic being head of government, and usually the leader of the majority party, alongside a separate head of state in the President. The German Democratic Republic likewise had technical separation of powers in the Chairman of Council Ministers and the Chairman of the State Council. Nazi Germany likewise began with a separate Chancellor and President, though Hitler of course merged both offices into one when Hindenburg died in 1934. While hardly democratic, New Helghan seems to follow the mould of a republic, with Vazari acting only as head of the ruling party or some form of governmental house, while either somebody or some collective body, like a state council rather than a president, holds head of state as well as possibly head of military. I've done a lot of digging, if you can't tell, but I like this shit. And while it could easily just be reused art assets, I will say a lot of New Helghan propaganda features the symbol of the aforementioned HWUP. So I'm running with the assumption they make up the ruling party here too. Either way, bang up job keeping the streets clean. After a lot of searching, we finally find our contact, Zeus, who's basically just that bald Scottish guy from Alien Isolation.
That's all I've got. Take what you want. Grab what you need. You don't know when you'll get another chance.
Like, is living in vents like a stereotype the rest of the world have about us that I don't know about? Anyway, we're pointed towards the Black Hand base in the Undercity, and in return we have the optional objective to hack into a police mainframe to wipe Zeus's record. All throughout the slums, there's so much of that world flavour I can't get enough of, but whether sneaking or shooting our way through the city, we reach the elevator down to Containment City, a shantytown labyrinth of freight containers where Tyrann's Black Hand has seemingly carved out a fiefdom right under the noses of the authorities.
People of Container City, this is Simon. You have a shadow marshal among you. I want you dead.
It's a decent enough area, surrounded by an entire population who want you dead, music adding to the tension, Blackhand thugs seen dealing out their brand of harsh justice on thieves, and an overall dingy Blade Runner aesthetic to the place.
Or should I say, Kellen? Yes, I know who you are. Thanks for the greed of your fellow victims.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, Tyrion isn't really selling me on his grandiose speeches. He's no Vizzari. Plus, unless you actually feel like stopping dead in your tracks to listen to him rant at you, you'll be kind of hilariously walking in and out of his speaker range mid-sentence while he's trying to taunt you. We get a sniper battle among the crates with these teleporting bastards, then a very simple zipline over to the... Oh. A very simple zipline over to the... What? How? Very simple zipline over to the... Okay, there we go. Blackhand base of operations, where we see something about an orbital mining station above Helghan, and breaching Tyrion's quarters, we discover who's really behind the organization.
Don't worry. Your use outweighs your recklessness. When the time comes, you will be needed to deliver the weapon.
I am honored. And when will it be ready?
Soon. The little mouse is here, hard at work. That's right, Vecton. Masar's talents aren't going to waste. Only now, she's focused on eliminating a different race. Yours. See, this is what happens when you blow things up. You come snooping around for answers.
We leave Tyrion to explode, kind of inexplicably. Then, wounded and unarmed, we're cornered and surrounded by Helghast security. Cut to prison torture.
I was wondering what would break first. Your spirit or your body?
We haven't got much time. I'm not going to harm you. The attack on Vecta had nothing to do with us. I want to end this, not start another war. Now tell me, who is Tyrion working with?
We tell Echo that it's Stahl, having survived the terroricides, now working behind the scenes, first to push Vecta into war using the Black Hand as instigators, and now to develop a virus using Masar, to which a desperate new Helghan government will have no choice but to use in self-defense.
What has Stahl promised you? Power?
He has promised us a home, and the survival of our people. At last we have a chance to negotiate from a position of strength, as we've always wanted. As we deserve.
Not like this. Have you forgotten the blood that runs through my veins?
How dare you question me?
I will be killed no matter who is targeted.
Be quiet at once.
Oh, Mother, please,
Never call me that!
Echo, Scholar Vizzari's half-Vectan granddaughter, is escorted away, and we're left alone with Sarek the Torturer, blacking out from the pain and awakening in a cell some days later, with an anonymous voice telling us they'll help us escape.
Just follow my instructions and I'll get you out of here.
Oh wow, a slight reduction in voice pitch, whoever could it be? There's a mandatory stealth section as we continue unarmed past guards and security cameras, with our anonymous helper occasionally sniping them to clear the route. Wait, it's you? I thought it was Natko. Echo explains that she's helping us only that we might convince Sinclair and the Vecton authorities to stand down. That while she wants to avoid war, once the Helghast have a working bioweapon, they'll have no choice but to use it, should Vecta attack.
Vizzari's doing this because she doesn't think she has a choice. If you attack, she will not back down. And why should she? She'd be defending her people, their home. This is all we have.
Echo grants us the ability to control spider drones, as well as tag enemies for sniping, and with our help, we sneak across the city to the wall. Passing through some civilian areas, there's some side things we can do. Saving this one dude rewards you with the M66 SMG, before his script stops and he returns to standby mode. And there's some other situations you can intervene in, giving a medkit to this lady in need, and preventing a suicide by bonking him in the face. Okay, not my most comfortable area of discussion, but I feel weird having some of this stuff gamed like this. It's supposed to show us how Victor's sanctions have only hurt the common people of Helghan, but putting these all ham-fistedly into one building, sandwiched between two combat sections, turning Lucas into this white knight savior type character in this one out of nowhere instance, it's weird, it's kinda hollow. When we surrender a medkit, it's not even like we're sacrificing anything as a player. We'll find another one in a minute or so, but the suicide intervention one? That's bad, right? Like, we've seen similar things in games before, right? But they're usually tied to some persuasive element or speech check, or an onus on the player to know what the individual needs to hear. Or I guess we can just press circle and break his jaw? Okay. Anyway, back to murdering your countrymen. We get a mech arena fight using stun grenades and shooting down shipping containers, and we eventually meet Echo at the incredibly demilitarized zone. We get given one of those heavily scripted sniper sections, you know, where you're told exactly what to shoot at and when, and any deviation is an instant fail, while she sneaks to transit cargo control to move us towards the wall. The final leg has us take over an ATAC docking station, with Echo hacking drones for support while we hold off an assault. Gotta admit, it's nice having the angry wasps on our side for once. Having survived, we climb aboard an ATAC ourselves while Echo controls it remotely to carry us over the wall, only to lose signal and crash into no man's land, making a run through mech and ATAC fire to reach the other side.
Remember what I said about Visari. Make sure Sinclair knows.
Stand down. Are you out of your goddamn mind? Watch it, Lucas. Trust is easily lost in this game, and you don't get it back.
She helped me escape. I'd be dead otherwise.
You're gonna side with her over me? She told you she's gonna kill Massar. The one thing we need. Look, the Black Hand, Visari, Stahl, there's no difference. Their agenda is the same. To wipe us out.
With the Vectin fleet already in orbit over the ruins of Helghan, we're sent to infiltrate the mining platform mentioned in the Black Hand base, believed to be the location of Dr. Massar and the virus. And in orbit, we can see for ourselves just how fucked the planet is. Inside the station, there's a tricky freefall through its internals, which I honestly thought I got right first time. Until it turned out the game expected me to land on a different identical looking walkway, and my landing wasn't scripted for this one. Inside, we meet Stahl's personal forces, including the Armadillo Trooper, with its white armour and personal shield that is its namesake. See, this is how Stahl's forces should have always looked. Skipping quite a lot, since it is just more of the same combat, it is here, I should add, where you can find the audio logs relating to the discovered lack of genetic difference between Vectins and Helghans, relating to my earlier comments on the ascientific basis of Helghast ideology. Either way, we find Massar and she gives us the whole creeper routine while letting us know that the virus is already in Stahl's hands down on Helghan itself. There's an awful escort mission after this, protecting our slow-ass cable car from swarms of shapes and colours, and reaching a hangar bay, we meet the ISA forces here to extract us. There's a problem with our ship, however, so we get a large tower defence section, prepping mines and turrets as this whole room's about to get swarmed by waves of Helghast. I spent a full 10 minutes here holding off enemies, though it would have been 5 if I'd heard Lucas's extremely quiet suggestion to maybe use one of the docked bomber turrets to trigger the enemies to stop spawning. As we're about to escape with Massar, Echo appears, demanding we hand her over. Sinclair orders us to shoot, but in the hesitation, Echo shoots both the trooper and the doctor, doing exactly what she said she'd do to protect Helghan from any weapon she might produce. With Sinclair a little bit miffed, we join Echo in an orbital drop down to the planet, dodging station debris and into the ruins of Puris itself, collapsing buildings. Landing in the city, all things considered, it's looking alright for being both nuked and recoed. I can confirm, by the way, this is Puris and not another city. But listening to audio logs actually suggests there was normal civilian life here up until the Terracide. Could be a plot hole, but I've taken it to mean there was actually some level of reconstruction and rehabilitation in the 6 months between Nuke and the green ending of Mass Effect 3. One newspaper clipping, in fact, dated in the immediate aftermath, mentions the war criminals Rico Velasquez and Thomas Savchenko, declared missing in action, but suspected of being protected by the Vectin government. And a final audio log describes a man rescuing a newborn child, while its dying mother gives it the name Vladko. Vladko Terran. And speak of the devil, Vlad appears, alive and well, and we follow him down into one of the petrosite fissures now torn into the crust. Last comment on the ruins though before moving on. It suffers again from the open world but not really syndrome, with us encouraged to explore, finding all these collectibles, with even more verticality with these gravity wells, and yet at the same time they've built this map in a way where it's far too easy to follow what looks like a pathway into an inescapable pit where death is now the only escape. Either way, following Tyrion and an emerging cruiser from somewhere below the surface, we spot the entrance to an underground facility, with the two of us splitting up to head on down.
I lost my entire family here. Everyone. I was the only person in my family who survived. And then they keep us here like animals. Sick as me. Yes, brother. There will be a reckoning. Star knows this. Vector will be ours. The civilians will not be killed. We will give them a chance to leave. And if they choose to stay, that is a different matter. The planet is ours. We were there first.
You know what? I can't. I'm just gonna pretend like I never saw you. Okay? We good? Yeah, we're good. Sorry. Breaching the front door defenses, we grab a rail car and head deeper in, entering onto an exegolic-sized fleet waiting underground. God, Rise of Skywalker sucked. You come to another extended firefight, this time defending a something tower from waves of enemies, and we've seen this before. Just look at the piles of corpses outside these doors. These fights really do swing between tedious and hilarious the longer they drag on. Eventually Tyrion shows up and we get another boss fight against someone with no armor yet able to tank repeated shotgun blasts to the head. It's different, I guess, being more about combating his tech, his shield, gadgets, drones, more than his personal martial power, which makes sense. The problem is, I just don't like the character. At all. God, I wish that were me. Old Vlad ain't very forthcoming with information and gets a bullet for his troubles. Meanwhile, the ISA are about to begin their attack, unaware of the Helghast fleet or Stahl's virus. So we hijack a dropship to the surface and try to convince Sinclair to abort, but his mind's made up. With us having been left with no choice but to go after Stahl directly, the battle begins overhead. And, good God, it never gets old! Just then, something! Okay, gripe time again. This was a bioweapon, right? Not an EMP? Why the red swirls of death around all the Vectin ships? I don't know, whatever, we're almost done with this shit. We lose Echo in the dropship in the chaos and are caught in the gravity well of Stahl's platform, lifting us up through the atmosphere while we see fleets engaged around us. Taking out exterior defences, we board the platform, seeing Helghan state broadcasts declaring war with Vector's attack on the homeworld. We enter into a beautiful command centre, bathed in orange glow from a planetary hologram, windows all around showing the battle outside. Unfortunately within this arena is yet another of the samey tedious shootouts we've been having all game, maybe a little tougher with shield guys and armadillo boys, but for the implied finality of this encounter, it's pretty fucking boring. But after that, there's nothing between us and the chairman.
The terroricide happened for a reason. The weak perished. Those of us that survived were meant to. Now, it is time for you to suffer that same fate. History demands it. The Helghast cannot live in Vector's shadow any longer.
Pulsar to ground team. I found a weapon.
Roger that, Pulsar. Securing the perimeter.
I thought I knew you, Lucas. After everything these sons of bitches have taken from us in the past, I didn't think you'd be the one I lost faith in. Be the one I couldn't trust.
Every day New Helghan continues to exist, we are under threat. I've shown them that. And now I'll show them how we can remove that threat. Forever. I've always tried to protect you, son.
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
And that rather abrupt ending was Killzone Shadowfall. Okay, where the hell to begin? Firstly, as far as endings go, definitely the worst of the series. Like, that's it. This is the end of Killzone. What the fuck?
I remember when the Helghast first came along. There was a belief that we could coexist. Through their suffering, we thought we saw our humanity. But this was a mistake. We should have realized then, as we do now, that the Helghast chose to forsake their humanity long ago. They are an aberration. They do not share our values, and they do not deserve our compassion.
For Kellen.
Okay, now that was Killzone Shadowfall. Alright, full disclosure, back in 2015 when I first played this, I was very underwhelmed. This is, and was not my favourite entry in the series, and while going through it with a fine-tooth comb has helped me appreciate more what it was trying to do, I'm still not in love. The gunplay is okay, being smoother and quicker than ever before. Any weight weapons once had now completely out the window, making it a pretty bog-standard FPS experience. But most encounters and missions suffer from repetition, overlong shootouts, and often frustrating stealth. As a technical showcase, there's no denying its success. Okay, sure, we're sitting here in 2021 in a world where the PS5 now exists. Yet, playing even now, I'm still amazed by every other panning vista or weapon model. Sure, there's maybe a muddy texture here and there, and faces in-game can be a bit stiff, but to be honest, I'm struggling to think of any specific instances of less than stellar graphics. Getting into the story and characters, it's not all bad. I'm not sold on the faceless except not protagonist it went with, Lucas Kellen being a bit bland as a pack of oatmeal, but whatever. It's hard to get over the fact he spends most of the game just nodding along to Sinclair's warmongering, but goes through a second half switcheroo to being sympathetic to Echo's cause. But hey, whatever, it's a change. And I guess his naivete that Sinclair was ever reasonable, or the father surrogate he could trust to do the right thing, did bite him in the end, so there's your cautionary tale against blindly following authority. We do go a bit Spider-Man 3 with the villains. Sarek, Tyrion, Echo initially, VIII, Stahl, and finally Sinclair, though, believe it or not, I've actually come to think he's one of the better antagonists of the series, and perfect for this story in particular. While he might read on paper as a Disney surprise villain, actually I was evil all along, he was actually completely consistent beginning to end. Instead, it's us, Lucas, and the player who change. Well, I mean, not me, personally. I always knew the ISA were evil. Fucking bastards killed Boris! Stahl is Stahl, but besides Malcolm McDowell not returning for the role, he's still completely mad and thoroughly genocidal. Though I guess in his old age, the self-serving power hunger has given way to him being a full-on true believer. I always took him as an opportunist, a racist by all means, but one whose main reasons for playing to the rhetoric were purely self-serving. Either way, it's an underwhelming end to his character, but at least we got one? But lastly, Maya Vazari, or as we know her, Echo, who stole most of the limelight for me. I always enjoy the trope of sworn enemies working together, plus reveling in every chance to see things from the Helghast perspective makes her addition and role in the story the exact thing Killzone needed. And honestly, it's kind of amazing it took 6 games for it to actually happen, Hack and Boris not really counting. Being the half-victim Special Forces sniper granddaughter of the franchise's greatest villain is a little fanfiction original character Do Not Steal, but there's a real irony in being a VIII while as far from his warmongering and xenophobia as you could get. Not to mention her design's great, even if bright red hood on a sniper is questionable. Not that the Helghast have ever worried about bright red glowing spots before this point. The story's setting is conceptually brilliant, each game obviously borrowing from the real world, here most heavily from the partition of Germany after World War II, but with analogues also drawable to the Korean Peninsula, the Cold War at large, racial apartheid, and even more so than the rather obvious East-West Germany analogue is the situation in Israel and Palestine. The crux, after all, of Vector's conflict not being around it divided by conquering powers or separated along ideological lines, but rather around perceived irreconcilable cultural differences, socio, religious, political, economic, whatever, I'm not actually getting into the subject, between two nations, both staking a historical claim on the same land. But, of course, it doesn't fit as a perfect analogy for any one thing, as it shouldn't. However, in their usual borrowing from reality to create an authentic feeling conflict, the sheer number of influences here pull the plot itself in a number of directions to where, if real-world analogues are indeed read into the game's story, certain implications, unintentional ones I'm sure, are made. Implications such as accepting foreign refugees from a catastrophe we created will result in terrorism, or ghettoization, or that weak-willed liberal governments will hand over entire cities to insert ethnic group here until we have no-go zones in our own country. Yeah, if we were to read that into the game's story, well, that'd sound fucking terrible, wouldn't it? Again though, I stress, it's not meant as allegory. Rather, this is just one unfortunate takeaway on a game that's borrowing so much, from the Berlin Wall to 9/11, around a fundamentally anti-war message, within the framework of an already well-established universe with 5 games worth of baggage already. All that aside, taking the story simply for what it is, I'm not a huge fan. It's extremely plot-heavy this time around, with so much exposition and characters and cutscenes for what boils down to the same 4-hour virus hot potato plot we already had in Killzone Mercenary. Meanwhile, the things which make Killzone for me, the camaraderie between a bunch of dumbass characters, the brutal, spectacular battle scenes, aren't here. But even if you enjoy the more subdued, slower-paced spy thriller gameplay, the biggest issue for me is just how goddamn po-faced miserable the whole thing is. I know I criticised Killzone 3 for being a little too comic booky, but this goes further in the opposite direction, to an entirely humourless, self-serious drag. It's not that it's a bad game, it's not that it even does any one thing particularly wrong or isn't functionally fine, it's just for the first game in this series, I can't tell you I was having fun playing it. Liberation was fun. Mercenary was fun. Killzone 3, for all its other flaws, wants nothing more than for you to have fun, bless its cotton socks. Shadowfall wants you to land on the platform it's specifically scripted to trigger the next cutscene. Do not deviate. We spent far too much money hiring actors for this for you to not be watching them for the next 24 minutes. Of course, I'm obligated to talk about the multiplayer. And while the servers are both up and quite active, meaning for once I can actually talk about them properly, I never actually played them before now, so whatever I say for this one can't be taken as anything more than a first impression. I can say that the multiplayer still feels Killzone. The feel and flow of the match is familiar enough that even never having played one before, I could still jump right in, having been familiar with the previous games. Though I had trouble accessing anything other than Team Deathmatch, despite Warzone, the series' premier game mode, supposedly being in the base game, but either I had bad luck or the servers were all running on DLC maps I hadn't downloaded. In terms of other game modes, besides offline bot zone back again, there was a later released co-op mode known as Intercept, effectively 4-player horde mode, and would end up available as both DLC and a standalone game. And with that, we come to the end of Shadowfall and the Killzone series. However, if the game's final minutes, the cyclical nature of its universe, and the history of the real world itself tells us anything, it's that whether we experience it in another game or not, the story of Vecta and Helghast is far from over. In 2015, Guerrilla Games announced Horizon Zero Dawn, its first original IP and non-Killzone title since 2004. It was a surprise departure for the studio, known for its first-person shooters, to attempt an open-world third-person action RPG, and not only attempt it, but excel with one of the most beloved and well-received games of its 2017 release year and of the PS4 library at large. The success of Zero Dawn was completely deserved, and with a follow-up in Horizon Forbidden West announced during the PS5 reveal in 2020, it's neither surprising nor unexpected that Guerrilla are giving us more of their new, beautiful and fascinating post-robot apocalypse world. But the lingering question for Guerrilla and Killzone fans remains: if or when will they return to their first?
If people work on something for too long, there is this notion of fatigue, creative fatigue, and they can no longer do their best work. Doesn't mean that we'll never do anything in the Killzone series, because we really love that franchise, we love the universe that we created, but it's just healthy for people to do something else.
Usually I end these retrospectives when they're an older or dormant series speculating on whether or not the series might return. With Killzone, I don't feel it's necessary. For now, Guerrilla are working on Forbidden West, and will perhaps continue to work on the Horizon universe, or something new altogether, for many years to come. But I'm quietly confident, even with the very recent closure of the Killzone website while editing this video, they will return to Killzone eventually, and I'm perfectly content to wait. But even if they don't, even if we never actually get a continuation of this story, that's okay. While Shadowfall was neither the greatest entry nor the most cathartic, satisfying conclusion, it may actually have been the best possible point this story could realistically end on. In fact, as an ending, depending on how, if ever, they follow it up, it's actually unique to the series. If we are to presume, as the game heavily implies, that assassinating Sinclair, the Warhawk who's almost single-handedly pushing the Vectan government towards war, is what prevents war from actually breaking out, then this was the ending which broke the cycle. Shadowfall's entire conflict, Helghast and Vectans struggling to coexist on Vecta, follows on as a direct consequence of the ending of Killzone 3. Okay, but Killzone 3's central conflict, and the Terracide, was a direct consequence of Killzone 2's ending. VIII's murder creating a power vacuum allowing Stahl to rise to power, and not to mention the literal fallout of Red Dust, the nuclear weapon which fueled the irradiated petrocyte which caused the Terracide, itself a direct consequence of the end of Killzone Liberation. And of course all of the events of Killzone 2 only happened as a consequence of Helghast's invasion of Vecta and Killzone 1, itself a consequence of some 300 years of history that we've been over. Realistically, the assassination of a government official would have some kind of consequence, but, taking the game at its word, the Killzone timeline is, for the first time, at peace, even if a fragile one. As I said when discussing Allegory, several hours ago, Killzone is, at its best, a vector for exploring human conflict in any form. And after having spent all this time playing and thinking and writing about this bloody series, I take the core fundamental theme of this franchise as conflict breeds resentment, resentment breeds conflict. And in addition, I actually think it makes arguments, probably unintentionally, against the Francis Fukuyama notion of the end of history. Fukuyama, an American political scientist and economist, argued that the end of the Cold War, collapse of the Soviet Union, and therefore proven success by default of liberal capitalist democracies, marked the end of history. That liberalism is the final form of human society, and that war itself could end upon the universal adoption of these ideals. Personally, I subscribe to a different philosophy. In the immortal words of Kurt, all for freedom and for pleasure, nothing ever lasts forever. Everybody wants to rule the world. True, Vecta and the ISA basically embody liberal capitalism even now in the 24th century, but you know what they say, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. The larger, far more cynical, and in no way trying to be post-capitalist proposition Killzone makes is that history doesn't end. And anytime we think our cushy way of life, our freedoms and our pleasures, will be the way of things forever, the evils that system is built upon will come home to roost sooner or later. I absolutely understand that the cycle of violence, war bad, man's inhumanity to man are incredibly common themes to the point of tropes, but there's few series I feel who have truly demonstrated this cycle of war and vengeance on both the timescale and geopolitical scale, as Killzone has. But where am I going with this? Well, when it comes to the future of the Killzone games, my question is less whether or not they will be made, but rather, where should they go from here? without compromising theme or the carefully constructed universe by just turning it into a fantasy good versus evil again, or by wrongly forcing an end of history resolution, how can we conclude the story in a way which works thematically, satisfactorily, and, not to put a final point on it, ethically? There are 4 options that I can see. VIII victory, the outright destruction of the Helghast nation. Helghast victory, the destruction of the Victins. Status quo, this basically being the ending Shadowfall gave us, but inevitably will lead sooner or later to one of the other outcomes. And finally, peace. Peace does not mean happily ever after forever, but simply a moment where Helghan and Vecta can finally escape their current hamster wheel, even if it lands them onto another with its own problems. But hey, Europe spent the last 100 billion years warring over everything from religion to land, but now we just argue over fishing quotas. Anything's possible. An end to this conflict, to the 2-century story arc over who owns Vecta, and a permanent reconciliation between both sides to put that issue to rest so we can finally move forward to worry about other things. Whether that's passport colours or the imminent Reaper invasion, either way, it would be a definitive conclusion to the story of Killzone. Now, the other options, of course, are still solutions.
No, that killing me changes nothing. It only prolongs the inevitable. It is simply a matter of biology. You were born on the wrong side, Marshal.
Helghan sweeping across West Vecta and just winning would end the conflict, but flies in the face of, well, everything. Not to mention, fails to address the internal problems of their society. Plus, I doubt, no matter how much of an underdog sympathy there is for the Helghast, that Guerrilla would ever do this. Likewise though, for an ending where the heroic ISA finally destroy the evil Helghast forever, this is at best pulpy good versus evil and entirely cheapens the universe they created, and at worst is fucking monstrous. When Guerrilla decided to base their conflict on race and complex territorial disputes between 2 questionable factions, they left themselves with the very difficult responsibility to resolve it, if indeed they ever plan to. So, what the hell do we do? Thankfully, throughout the story there are signs of a brighter future. Evidence that the differences between Victins and Helghans is far less than everybody had been led to believe. Acknowledgement that Helghans are not monolithic, signs of weakness in a Helghast political framework, and that change from within is not impossible. The problem, really, seems to be the 2 sides' inability to ever come together for anything less than building a wall between them. With one exception. Do you remember those newspaper side plots I brought up? After sweeping the elections on the planet Gear, the Helghast Workers' Union Party's promises for industrial reform and workers' rights failed to manifest. In its place, repression and state violence began to take root as the colony seemed en route to becoming another brutal Helghast state. Only this time, something happened. The same Helghans who lifted the party to power were now joining non-Helghans in protests across the planet. The old strategies of division and xenophobia, which were all these Helghast politicians had, were failing. While, for the first time ever, these 2 groups had come together in solidarity, irrespective of race, to fight instead for their common class interests. Which leads me to my suggestion on where the story should go next. To an end of the age of colonies and the hegemony of Earth. Bear with me. End of the day, a Killzone game needs warfare. A first-person peaceful transition of power would be different, but not exactly what most players are expecting. But throughout my scraping together every scrap of lore on this series, there's been one lingering realization. The UCN is kind of the real villain, right? Yes, Killzone's greatest evil is Scholar Vazari and his ilk, but the real and only dominant power in this universe, who has only ever been motivated by the need to maintain that power, is Earth. The same Earth who, as we learn through Blackjack's file and Mercenary, has a history of quelling rebellion and independence movements among its colonies. Earth who maintains the largest military in the galaxy, only even closely challenged by Helghan at its absolute height and with the benefit of superweapons. Earth who installs loyal colonial governments policed by ISA military forces recruited locally but who take their orders from the UCN. An Earth who demands resources from its colonies and will use military force to ensure the continued flow. Earth is an empire. No, it may not be as outwardly brutal as Vazari's aspiring Helghan empire would have been, but it's hardly benevolent. Looking to the wheel of history for inspiration, just as the First and Second World Wars saw the downfall of the old European empires, maybe the next step post-extrasolar war, and perhaps as a way to resolve the current Cold War on Vecta, is the inevitable struggle for independence.
Guess we're both outcasts now. Maybe in all this, it's not such a bad thing to have in common.
I don't mean to fanfic here, but in a story where causality and consequence permeate every title, as far as logical next steps go which could actually provide satisfying resolutions, this just makes sense to me. An ending, not of history, but just the current epoch, and one in which Victon and Helghast may finally fight side by side for a common human interest, and as what they have been since before even the very beginning of this series, as kin. Well, I'm never doing that again. Awards time!
Absolutely badass!
Yeah, we'd be here all day, as if we haven't already, going through every unit one by one and discussing their designs, so I just went ahead and made a tier list. There! But for me, the top tier designs are the Killzone 2, 3 and Shadowfall Sniper, with their inhuman trinocular mask and hooded poncho, the Killzone 2 and 3 Grenadier, because what's better than trinocular? Quadnocular, bitch! And simply, the Helghast Trooper, as seen with slight variations from 1 through to 3. Boring, I know, but it's the template in which every other design is moulded.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
Yeah, you saw it coming. I already explained why. The lack of mask, the ugly body armor, but at the end of the day, it's just kinda boring, and far too common in the latter half of the game. Freedom. So, I'm only counting playable characters present in most of the game. So, no Echo from the last 5 minutes of Shadowfall, and for simplicity, I'm taking Templar as the main protagonist of Killzone 1, being the only one there for every mission. By this standard, of course, we are left with 4 generic as hell soldier dudes. So, I'll go with Sev.
Those horrible yellow eyes!
The Best Protagonist award snubbed the entire Helghast race, so we're making our own category, with Blackjack and Fascism, any named Helghast character who isn't a main villain. Now I know you're all expecting me to put Boris, but I gotta be real and give Haka his due. He's the real hero of Killzone 1 and deserves a little love. The bald fuck.
We've been cut off and we need assistance!
Oh my god, it's a girl! Oh my god.
Killzone isn't exactly a taco fest, but there's at least one female character in every game. Sometimes even 2. In fact, there's that few, I'm just going to put them all up for consideration here. Luger, Jammer, Dr. Batten, Admiral Grey, Head of Azari, Echo, Dr. Massar, and the corpse of Lyria Harkin. But I gotta go with Echo. I doubt it, but if they brought Killzone back, she'd actually be my first pick for the player character. But also, credits to Admiral Grey for being the first and only combatable female villain of the series. Yes, Queen, more female war criminals.
Peace.
Ha! You really think I'd give Echo a second chance in an award and forget about Boris? Nobody forgets Borishek! Best boy, don't ask no questions. There's no point doing a separate best and worst, so we're just going to rank all 6 in order. As it stands right at this moment, Killzone 2. Pinnacle of the series gameplay, best encapsulates the themes of the franchise and is still one of my favourite games of all time. Killzone 3. Yeah, I ragged on it, but it's dumb fun, and I do kinda love it. Killzone Mercenary. The more I dwell on it, the worse its characters and story become, but goddamn is it a good handheld game. Killzone 1, I guess? It's not the best, it's not the worst. I can't really say much about it. It was just the opener to the series. I like it. It was a good time going back to it, that's all I'll say. And finally, it was a toss-up for the bottom 2, but Killzone Liberation. I'm never likely to play this again, and at times I did just want it to end, but it's a really well made and unique among the series game. While Killzone Shadowfall was a big budget launch title, had the tech, had the hype, but if I'm even debating with myself which is my least preferred, I gotta go with this one over the PSP spin-off from 2006, just on this basis alone. And that's it. If you made it to the end, I can only thank you for joining me on this, and I hope that you found these videos interesting. This has been by far the largest video I've done, and while I'm proud I accomplished exactly what I set out to do, I will not be doing this again anytime soon. Not to this extreme anyway. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my patrons who have kindly sponsored this channel and its content. Manny Paredes, Andras Cholo, Josh Bass, Big Buzz, Bryn, Chea, Garrett Lorick, Jay Pastorelli, Arami Ragnarok, Saiyan Warrior 07, Wily Machine King, I will never not want to call that Willy Machine King, it's just so much more amusing, Corey Montez, Cringe McGee, and David Rocha. Thank you all so much, and, be kind, drink water, be mindful of bias in your media, and, keep politics out me video games. You bastards. Yeah. Didn't see that coming, did you? Bye.
Colonel Templar.